Torah is just a long string of numbers. Some say that it's a code sent to us from God.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's just good stuff. Check this out, okay? The word for the Garden of Eden, Kadem. Numerical translation, 144. Now the value of tree of knowledge, all right, in the garden, right? Eitz HaChaim, 233. 144, 233. And you can take those numbers. So the,
you know, like the Fibonacci sequence?
Fibonacci.
Fibonacci is an Italian mathematician in the 13th century. If you divide 144 into 233, the result approaches theta.
Theta?
Theta. The Greek symbol for golden ratio, golden spiral.
Wow. I never saw that before. That's like that series you find in nature? Like the face of a sunflower?
Wherever the spirals.
You see this math everywhere.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you're about to attain true gnosis. And in this video today, we're going to do some reading. I want to go through Plato's Timaeus, because I always talk about this. I always talk about how Genesis has all this influence from Plato. I don't think I've ever really showed or went through it on this channel. Really, not as I never like totally took a time to just dedicate just to that. So I'm going to do that. First, I want to kind of run down why we even get to this question at all. And it obviously has a lot to do with the dating of the Hebrew Bible, which came into question first with the German, the Dutch radicals and the German scholarship of the 18th and 19th century questioning even if Israel even existed. Because this is before the Meshastelli, before the Mernapisteli. The data they had back then was even less than we have today. And they're looking at this like, this is freaking Narnia. We have nothing. We don't even know if Israel existed, barely. And I think they concluded that it did, but that I think they were pretty much in line with the later Copenhagen school, which is still around today, which is that the Hebrew Bible, the Torah section is later, and that, the prophets are heavily redacted, but there's sections that go back to, maybe even pre-exilic or whatever. Some of them are even more minimalist than that. I think even the prophets are written later. I fall somewhere in the middle of all this. I think we should take each text individually instead of just trying to look at this as a whole. For Isaiah, for example, I think there probably is a layer of Isaiah that does go back to right around the time of the exile, for example. I think that the text, what it's doing, predicting the fall of Jerusalem, let's get real. It's warning Jerusalem, it's warning the people of what's going to happen and the suffering and all that stuff. I don't think there was a person going around doing that. This text only makes sense after. So I think even the oldest parts of Isaiah, probably right after, maybe even while they're in Babylon, writing this stuff, trying to make sense of it all. Trying to cope, actually. This is what I think it is. I think Revelation is another example. Revelation is a cope of the temple being destroyed. And we had the Messiah with us the whole time, but we didn't listen to him. That type of thing. I think Judaism is an older reiteration of what Christianity does. The temple gets destroyed, Christianity blows up. Same thing with Judaism. Second temple gets destroyed, Judaism comes out of that. that's kind of where I'm at. That's very, very simplistic view of mine, but I can go into deeper. I do want to talk about Genesis in particular, though. Genesis and Plato's Timaeus, because there's something going on in Plato's Timaeus and in Genesis that you don't find anywhere else. And that's the creation of a being that is in the image of God. Notice how I use the term being. I didn't use the word mortal yet. Because I don't even think Genesis is trying to make Adam into a mortal in particularly until that's why I think there's a lead up to that. But I think Adam is meant to be a God, a son of God, just like all the other sons of God, part of the Elohim. And then I think there's two Adams too. So this documentary hypothesis posits that there's like some sort of error, mistake happening where the text has two versions of Adam that's a contradiction. We'll get to that. I'll show you what I mean by that. But I used to think that made sense. Like, oh yeah, contradiction, of course. But it's like they could have fixed that at any time during the 300 years before, between the Maccabean period and whenever this is written. There could have been a redaction. They could have fixed this, and they don't. And even later rabbis are wrestling with this, and this actually turns into a big thing in Kabbalah, which is the Adam Kadmon concept, the primordial man, that there's two Adams, the spiritual Adam, the perfect spiritual Adam, and then the fleshly mortal Adam. And I think it's fair to say there's something like that going on in Genesis. And let's get into it. So I also want to talk about how Platonism would even be on the table for like Judaism and Platonism. What the hell? And it's actually, I think there's a lot more evidence than people think when you look at Alexandria and look at the Persian period. This is the prologue of Diogenes Laertius's on Lives of the Eminent Philosophers, and he makes this into this Athenian tradition is more than just the Greeks in his eyes. It goes beyond that. He says, the discipline of philosophy, some say, originated among the barbarians. The Persians, they say, had their magi. The Babylonians and Assyrians had their Chaldeans. The Indians, their naked sages. And the Celts and Galatians had their druids. The Semnotheoi, as Aristotle says in his Magicus, and Sochian in the 23rd book of his Succession. And they mention Ochus was a Phoenician, Zalmox is a Thracian, and Atlas a Libyan. According to the Egyptians, Hephaestus was the son of the Nile, and philosophy, which over their priests and prophets presided, began with him. Between Hephaestus and Alexander of Macedon, there elapsed 48,863 years, in the course of which occurred 373 eclipses of the sun and 83 of the moon. Between the Magi, the first of whom was Zoroaster the Persian, and the capture of Troy, there elapsed 5,000 years. What? As Hermodorus the Platonist says in his work on mathematics. So Platonists are writing about Zoroaster. In fact, Zoroaster is mentioned in Plato in Alcibiades, first Alcibiades. And people thought that was an interpolation at first. But now more scholars are saying, no, I think it's authentic. Because people thought that Zoroaster was a product of the Hellenistic period for some reason. But now people are starting to say, actually, no. I think and there's another fragment from a pre-Socratic, not a pre-Socratic, one of the Ionian historians. What the hell's his name? Some Lydian guy, something Lydian. I can't remember his first name. It's one of those like early, like 5th century BC historians that we only have fragments of. Because I know, before Herodotus, there's a whole bunch of historians. People don't know this. People are like, Herodotus is the first historian. He's the father of history. And yeah, in our minds he is, because that's the first history book that we get. But Herodotus is citing tons of historians that he knows about that go back hundreds of years. He cites Hecataeus of Abdera, of Malatius, who we only have fragments of. And there's another guy, some guy, Xanthus the Lydian, I think his name is. I don't know why I'm thinking the name Xanthus for some reason. But this guy mentions, in the fragments of him, he mentions Zoroaster. And when scholars first came across this, they're like, these are fake fragments. There's no way. And then they're like, and the Alcibiades, the first Alcibiades mentions Zoroaster. That's got to be an interpolation. There's no way. And then more people have been looking at first Alcibiades and going, no, the text looks like Plato wrote it. Like the linguists are reading it and going, no, this sounds like normal Plato to me. So Zoroaster definitely is part of the tradition of Platonism. He's like a pre-Platonist in a way. The reason why I bring that up is because the people in the East are also kind of tied to this tradition a little bit. So the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, the Persians, and the Judeans, they're right there. They are right there, and they actually are, from the archaeologist standpoint, their Jewish quarters in Alexandria is right next to the library. So even the poorest among them are sitting there looking at the library all day. I'm sure some of them got jobs there, did things around there, went inside there. And so these become like book people, become bookish people just by chance. And I think they get acquainted with the philosophers. And another thing about Platonism is, because one of the criticisms I get is like, oh, look at this big difference, but right here, they'll point out something in Genesis and say, Plato would never say that. Oh, look, the God's jealous. Plato would never say that. And these are all fair points. And these have always been kind of like maybe back off a little bit. But then you start to realize when you read every single Platonist, whether it's middle Platonist or Neoplatonist or whatever, like Alcinous or Maximus of Tyre, and then whoever it is, they're all different. They're all extremely different from each other. They all disagree on so much stuff. They agree on cosmology. They agree on virtue. They agree on like ethics, stuff like that. But they all have their differences on what they think about the gods, what they think about certain. They have differences, is what I'm saying. So there could be Platonists or adjacent of Platonists rewriting Jewish mythology and creating the story of Genesis through this, and they don't have to necessarily be aligned with Plato and everything. That's another big thing people need to realize. And so I just want, before I even pull up Timaeus, we're going to start with Timaeus and we're going to flip over to Genesis and do a comparison. I want to show a clip of an old video I made where I talk about this guy named Demetrius Phalereum, who comes up in Josephus as the Greek who came from Macedonia during the age of Alexander and became like the chief librarian in Alexandria. And he comes from a line of thinkers that go back to Plato. So this is what I said in this video. Let me just make sure I'm not muted here. Okay.
What solid evidence do we have that Platonism has any influence on Judaism? If we continue down our line of masters, schools of Athens, as I trace the roots of Thales down to Plato, the next three school of masters after Plato is Aristotle, who, after the conquest
Let me back up
of any given time,
back up a little bit.
any given time.
There we go.
What happened? How is it that when we get to the time of Ptolemy II, the creation of the Septuagint, that we all of a sudden had the monotheistic approach to theology from these Israelites? I think the answer to this question is very simple. The popular philosophy of any given time period is going to dramatically affect the theology of that period. For example, we see how much the Stoics and Epicureans influenced the Middle Platonists, who in turn influenced Christian theologians and church fathers of the 2nd century. But what about the 3rd century BCE? At the time when the Pentateuch was being put together, Platonism was on the rise, along with Aristotle's school of the Peripatetic and the skepticism of Pyrrho. These philosophers, with the resources of the great library of Alexandria, with access to thinkers like Zoroaster, the Magian, and Heraclitus, some of the earliest thinkers to exhibit monotheistic or skeptic tendencies against the dogmas and superstitions of the day.
Initiation here into the ancient mysteries, so honored among men.
By the way, just to pause this real quick, this is Heraclitus. When I made this video, for some reason, I go among people like Heraclitus and Zoroaster, and then I just started reading this, or I had Derek read this. I didn't actually say who this is. This is Heraclitus. he was a skeptic in every sense. He talked a lot of shit about the Dionysian Bacchic cults of the daytime, talking about how like these people, what are they doing? They're like getting washed in blood, and they're doing all types of weird rituals. The gods don't care about this stuff. This is nonsense. And he says, like, he's talking about the initiation, how it mocks holiness, and how, look, they raise their voices at stone idols, like a man argues with a doorpost. And this is the attitude that you get in the Hebrew Bible about idolatry and, you know, worship of idols and all these wild ritual stuff. This is the same attitude. This is a Platonist attitude. And this is not what you would find in Assyria or Babylon. The Syrians and Babylonians were into all that stuff. I just got done reading about the Kisu festival and the Zukru festival, which would have been in the 700s BC. And they were into wild shit, just like the Greeks were. Phalluses, all that. They're pagans, man. So this is this sort of more mature way of looking at the divine is sort of a Persian period thing. Persian period to Hellenistic period thing. So, anyways.
Mocks holiness. They raise their voices at stone idols, as a man might argue with his doorpost. They have understood so little of the gods.
Thales was the first master of the school of Athens. He was known for traveling to see the greatest minds of his day in Egypt and Babylon. He taught that water was the first principle, arche, in which...
Now, this is the beginning of the material monist. This is what they're called, the material monist. It's the first wave of monism that creeps up into the schools of Athens. And it's basically, they all have their own version of it. The arche. And it's funny because the Septuagint uses the word NRK in the beginning. This is the. So if I actually could pull up Genesis right now, actually, real quick. I already have it ready just to show you what I mean. NRK right there. And this is obviously a translation, but when they're translating this text, they're thinking in the beginning, hotheos, ton, uranon. They're thinking like Uranos and Gaia in the beginning, and I think this is being ran through and reinterpreted through the Platonist or maybe even Pythagorean, basically the Athenian Alexandrian lens, or whatnot. So, and this is the Hebrew uses the word bereshit. But anyways, I'm just saying, like, you could see this is the beginning. The Greeks thought of the NRK in different ways. Thales thought the water was the arche, and other philosophers, I think Anaximenes thought it was air, apeiron, or the infinite, and then some thought it was fire. Heraclitus thought it was fire. So, yeah, different. There was different material monists with different arches, but they believed in a beginning, an arche, some sort of beginning thing. And then you get the rejection of material monism, which comes up a little bit later with Parmenides, the school of Parmenides, who says it's all, Parmenides and Anaxagoras, who say it's all nous, the mind. And this is where you get Plato's drawing from this. Yes, nous, mind, the one, the monad. It's all mind. So it's perfect. There is no way we can describe it. It's not water. It's not fire. It's not air. That all comes later. That's all created by the one. So basically what I'm getting at is this develops. You could see it developing in the pre-Socratic thoughts. And then Plato is the one who systemizes it for the first time and makes sense of it all. And then he has this big struggle between Parmenides and Heraclitus, which is flux and the illusion of flux. Like, look at this. We're all in this universe, and we can see the flux. We all can see it. We can see the waters flowing. We can see the air. We can see the wind moving. Everything's changing. Life is decaying. People are dying. People are being born. There's a flux. There's no steadiness. So what do we do with that? Well, Parmenides says, no, it's all just an illusion. Really, it's all about being and becoming. And so like the flux is an illusion, and we're all moving towards the state of pure being. And Plato thought the way to solve this is with the forms, which is there is a flux. We do inhabit the world of flux, but there is a perfect form for everything. There's a perfect river. So even though the river, we can't step in the same river twice, the form of the river is still a river, if that makes sense. So anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself, but just bear with me and we'll get there.
Life can spring from. Thales believe in an uncreated being who crafts phusis, nature, which all things are from. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters.
And I was kind of suggesting here that the waters motif is Thalian, but I don't actually know if that makes much sense now. This is years ago when I made this video. Because the waters motif is pretty ubiquitous in mythology. You find this in the Rig Veda, where there's the Rig Veda, believe it or not, uses the term "the one." Let me just pull that up real quick. Rig Veda creation. So this hymn right here, you could see this is way before Thales, and I'm just going to show you this is the translation from the Sanskrit right here, where it says, "There was neither death nor immortality, nor there was torch of the day, the one." So this is a very monistic, and I actually argue now that Eastern Aryan, Indo-Aryan philosophy via the Persians is what influences the Greeks to start this pre-Socratic school. So I think this is actually what we're looking at right now is actually the origins of pre-Socratic and even later Platonist thought. The one breathed windlessly and self-sustaining. There was the one and there was no other. And here we go. Here's the waters thing. And first there was only darkness wrapped in darkness, and this was only illuminated by cosmic waters. So I think the whatever's happening in Genesis is hearkening back to something very ancient. You even find this in the Babylonian and Akkadian creation myths with the two waters and the deep and all that stuff. I do think that there's something going on there. So anyways, I think I just lost my screen. Let me just pull that back up again. Yeah.
Notice how water is the first thing that is formed. It is something similar. Herodotus described Thales died, and Anaximander became the second master, who is said to be the teacher of Pythagoras, who brought these teachings to Italy. Anaximander is the earliest use of the word empyrean, or infinite, limitless, to designate the original first principle of the cosmos, uncreated, beginning of all things. The first philosopher to employ in philosophical context the term arche, which until then had meant beginning or origin. Anaximander called this something by the name phusis, or nature. Next after him was Anaximenes, third master of the school of Athens, from the Milesian school, who was a material monist who sought to discover the arche, the beginning or origin, the one underlying basis of all things. Anaximenes also believed that air was divine. He identified air with the breath of life, and thus the soul as well as the air in the atmosphere. Only a single sentence-long quote by Anaximenes survives. Just as our soul, being air, holds us together, so pneuma.
What's interesting about this is more, to me, this is more evidence that Genesis borrows from the Greeks, because the word for breath also is the word for spirit. And in the Hebrew Bible, the word for breath is also the word for spirit. So ruach is the word they use. And we could show that actually. Let me just finish this thought and I'll pull it up.
And air encompass and guard the whole world. This is the first extant source to use the word pneuma, or breath. Genesis 2:7 says, "The Lord God formed man from dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life."
And just so you guys know, the word Genesis uses is pneuma. There, it's the same word. God blows pneuma into man and makes him a living being.
The pneuma, and the man became a living being.
So, hold on, let me just X out of that. Okay, so let me just show you guys Genesis real quick. And we saw the Spirit of God, and that's right here, pneuma theou. And the Hebrew uses the term ruach, which is right here, and ruach. So, or ruach. I don't know how. I think it's ruach. But they had the same concept as the Greeks do, with breath and life and spirit mean the same thing. That's a very specific thing for one word to sort of be like, carrying all that weight in one theological package. So we're gonna go back. We're gonna get back to this. We're gonna do. I just want to finish that video, and then I'm gonna continue, and then we're gonna start reading Timaeus and then Genesis. So
Genesis lines up perfectly with the philosophy of the pre-Socratics. After Anaximenes, you get Heraclitus, who claims to announce an everlasting logos, or word, according to which all things are one, in some sense. Opposites are necessary for life, but they are unified in a system of balanced exchanges. The world itself consists of a law-like interchange of elements, symbolized by fire. And Anaximenes is criticized by Parmenides, who starts the school of the Eleatics. He is called the father of logic. It is during this time.
I actually think Parmenides might be the most important of the pre-Socratics when it comes to the framework that is adopted by Plato and beyond Plato and Judaism and Christianity for so many reasons. His cult that he started, the Eleatic school, was spreading all throughout Italy, sort of like congruent with the Pythagoreans that were also in Italy. And they were like really big into like salvation and stuff like that, being saved and so your soul and all that. They were big into this stuff, and they were healers, and they were big philosophers thinking about ethics, those type of things. Big worshippers of Apollo, big Apolloist monist. That's what I would say about them.
That superstitions and dogmas are being challenged. Anaxagoras would be the next master of Athens, and his innovative theory of physical nature is encapsulated in the phrase, a portion of everything in everything. Its primary expression is found in the following difficult fragment. And since the portions of both the large and the small are equal in amount, in this way too all things would be in everything, nor can they be separate. Who was also at this time a staunch skeptic and natural philosopher. He's the one who teaches Socrates, and Socrates is the teacher of Plato. Plato would be the one to unify the entire base of knowledge that
I think I was just muted for a second, but I was going to say that I just said basically Archelaus is the teacher of Socrates, but I just said it anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Athens had been accumulating from the world for the past 200 years, and bring them into his dialogues through the character of Socrates, who was his teacher.
Okay, so all right, so that's how you get to Plato. We got to Plato, but how do we get from Plato? Make sure you guys can see me real quick. That's how we get to Plato. But how do we get from Plato to the Hebrew Bible? Is there any way? Is there even a connection to get us into the Library of Alexandria? That's a good question for someone to ask. Like, dude, how are you just going to insert this? How are you just going to assert that they're borrowing from them if we don't even know that they were even in contact with each other? So that's a great question, and that's what I would have asked if I was you.
Yes, an exposition of
We're going to get to Timaeus.
Human active reason.
So I explained Timaeus, but we're going to get to that, so I don't have to. I can skip over all that. And I think I talk about Plato for quite a long time. Yeah, I do. Okay, right here.
What solid evidence do we have that Platonism has any influence on Judaism? If we continue down our line of masters, schools of Athens, as I trace the roots of Thales down to Plato, the next three school of masters after Plato is Aristotle, who, after the conquest of Alexander the Great, is sent into exile by the Eleusinian priest, who charge Aristotle with blasphemy against the gods. And Aristotle was replaced by Theophrastus, who was also charged.
I tried everything. Cough.
My bad about that.
Leaders with blasphemy against the gods. Now keep in mind, all of this is happening after Socrates. Now, what is happening with these masters of Athens being at odds with the religious leaders, the priests Eleusinians? They're obviously challenging their dogmas, superstitions. Now Theophrastus was the student and new master of the school who taught Demetrius Phalereum. Demetrius Phalereum is also exiled, and he moves to Alexandria with Pyrrho the Skeptic. After traveling the world with Alexander the Great, meeting Brahmins and Magi, and living amongst the Chaldeans in Babylon. And they went down to the court of Ptolemy in Alexandria to help build the library. According to multiple sources, Demetrius Phalereum was trying to collect all the books in the inhabitable world, and was commissioned by Ptolemy to translate the laws of the Jews into Greek. In my personal opinion, it is at this time when the Pentateuch is put together in its current monotheistic form, with influences from the Platonists of the time period. You see, we have a direct line from Thales, the pre-Socratics, all the way down to Plato, and then continuing down to Demetrius, who moves to Alexandria, Egypt, and creates the Pentateuch. Here's what Josephus says about this. When Alexander had reigned 12 years, and after him Ptolemy Soter 40 years, Philadelphus then took the kingdom of Egypt and held it 40 years within one. He procured the law to be interpreted and set free those who were come from Jerusalem into Egypt and were in slavery there, who were 120,000. The occasion was this. Demetrius Phalereus, who was library keeper to the king, was now endeavoring, if it were possible, to gather together all the books that were in the habitable earth, and buying whatsoever was anywhere valuable or agreeable to the king's inclination, to which inclination of his Demetrius was zealously subservient. And when once Ptolemy asked him how many tens of thousands of books he had collected, he replied that he already had 20 times 10,000, but that in a little time he should have 50 times 10,000. But be said, he had been informed that there were many books of the laws among the Jews worthy of inquiring for, and worthy of the king's library, but which, being written of characters and in dialect of their own, will cause no small pains in getting them translated into the Greek tongue, that the character in which they are written seems to be like that which is proper to the character of the Syrians, and that its sound when pronounced is like theirs also, and that this sound appears to be peculiar to themselves. Wherefore he said that nothing hindered why they might not get those books to be translated also. For while nothing is wanting that is necessary for that purpose, we may have their books also in this library. So the king thought that Demetrius was very zealous to procure him an abundance of books, and that he suggested that this was exceeding proper for him to do, and therefore he wrote to the Jewish high priest that he should act accordingly. Demetrius wrote in a letter, It is not fit for us, O king, to overlook things hastily or to deceive ourselves, but to lay the truth open. For since we have determined not only to get the laws of the Jews transcribed, but interpreted also, for thy satisfaction, by what means can we do this? Many of the Jews are now slaves in thy kingdom. For both these people and
I think you get the point. He basically says he's going to translate all the laws of the Jews. I'm going to do it for you, Ptolemy. I'm your man. I'll do it. And the point, what I wanted to show you here was we have a line of succession that brings us all the way into Alexandria. And he's the chief head of the project of transcribing the laws of the Jews into Greek. What's funny about that, he doesn't just say he's going to translate them all. He says, like, we're going to compile it. Like, he's not just taking their books and just going, oh yeah, I'm just going to translate exactly what it says. This is a big project that he's talking about of compilations of stuff. So there is something more than just translating going on. That's interesting that we have that. Austrian stories. Thank you for the $2. Do you think Giorgiani's Nordic theory has validity? Yeah, I definitely do. I think he has a lot of interesting things to say. Thank you for that. Doc Tape, thank you for becoming a member. Appreciate that. Same with Lisa. Thank you for becoming a member. Good to see you. All right. So you see, I just laid it out. Now we have the setting. Now we know. One more thing I want to show you from Plato, because if you actually read Plato, Republic is the book you have to read before you even get to Timaeus and Cthonius. It is the lead up. It is the reason why he basically argues in Republic, we need a noble lie. We need a new priesthood. We need to teach people that our laws and our God is perfect and goes all the way back to the beginning. And this is what he argues that throughout the Republic the whole time, through the mouth of Socrates. He even disses Hesiod and Homer. He says, look at this. Are we then going to allow our children to hear any old stories so easily created by any passerby, and to let into their souls opinions which are for the most part the opposite of those which we think ought to have when they're grown up? No, there is no way we should let them do that. Then first of all, it seems that we must put them into care of those who create these tales, and accept any that they compose which are good, and reject those that are not. So this is some serious fascistic shit right here, dude. Censoring poetry that they don't like, and promoting the ones they do. We shall persuade their nurses and mothers to tell their children the approved stories, and form their souls with them much more than their bodies by handling them. The majority of the stories that they tell nowadays must be thrown out. What? Are you serious? When I first read this, I was blown away by this. Which ones in particular? In the greater stories, we shall see the lesser ones, for both the greater and the lesser stories must be of the same pattern and be capable of the same effects. Do you not agree? I do. But I don't understand what you mean by the greater stories. The ones which Hesiod and Homer told us, as well as the other poets. For they composed and told false tales to people, and as I see it, and are still doing so. Which ones are they, he asks. What is the one in them that you are criticizing? It's what we must criticize first and foremost, especially if the false is tale and not told well. What's that? Whenever one makes bad comparison in one's story, whenever dealing with what sort of beings the gods and heroes are, like an artist who paints nothing like those whose likeness he wishes to paint. Yes. It is right to criticize things like that. But what do you mean? What do we mean of what kind of things we're talking about? Firstly, is the man who told the greatest lie about the greatest matters and made a poor job of it, about how Uranos accomplished what Hesiod says he did, and furthermore, how Kronos took revenge on him. Now, classicists, or anyone who knows Greek mythology is going, what? What? This is Hesiod. This is Homer. This is the basis of Greek cosmology. The story of the succession of Uranos, the first king of heaven, and how he gets deposed by Saturn, Kronos, and how Kronos gets deposed by Zeus. And Here we got Socrates saying this story sucks and it needs to go. And we need to replace it with this story where there's one perfect God who's always there and never gets overthrown. This idea of gods overthrowing gods is bad. And this is the Babylonians had this too, by the way. So a lot of people want to jump straight from Genesis to like the Anuma Elish. And it's like, dude, this story has a succession of gods. Genesis has one God that never goes away from beginning to end. That is, we're already not in the same, this is not the same anymore. And this is this is Socrates in Plato's writings, is where we get the idea, the revolutionary idea to get rid of this idea of gods being succeeded by new gods. And Kronos' deeds and sufferings, the hands of his son. And even if they were true, I would not think that they should be told. They should be told to fools and youngsters in this lighthearted way, but should be kept strictly quiet. And if there were any to tell the story, then as few as possible should hear it in secret, which is interesting because the Christians decided to preserve a lot of these texts. And they didn't really, and it's true, this is kind of how it was. No one really told these stories until the Renaissance, where they got their hands on these texts again, and then you start finding them in the artwork again. So there's something weird, something interesting about this idea of don't tell anyone about the old myths. Tell them the new myths are the oldest myth. And don't tell them about the real old myths. The only secret people can read this stuff. Because we wanted to teach them a special way to be taught that makes them think differently. They think they're going to heaven. They don't think they're going to Hades. They think they're going to a special place. They think they're special. They think the barbarians are not special. It's a different way of raising people. It's a brainwashing. It's a republic where people are brainwashed. Literally. They're taught through the noble eye. It's actually kind of crazy to think about this. They have a whole eugenics program in here. You got to read Republic. If you haven't read Republic, just don't even watch my video. Go read it right now. That's how important the Republic is. If you're into ancient text, if you haven't read Republic yet, stop my video. What are you waiting for? Go read it. It'll change. You won't think of the world. You will never see the world the same ever again. Michael Sugrue was one of the greatest philosophers ever, one of the greatest teachers of philosophy ever. I'll show you who you might. Some of you might know who he is. This guy right here. Let me just share my screen. If you guys have ever ran into this guy right here, he just passed away a couple years ago. This guy, this freaking genius guy. In fact, let me just play a clip of him that I can see. Machiavelli. That's probably a good one. Let's see if I can find one where he talks about Plato. Socrates, Nietzsche's will to power. That's a good one. Yeah, let's play this one.
Stop you. Well, Nietzsche says, and this is a fascinating possibility, although I'm not certain if it's true, he says that when people are frustrated in their desire to cause pain to others, the consequence of that is that they decide to start imposing pain on themselves. Stop you. Well, Nietzsche says, and this is that
was a bad clip. Anyways, this guy he's probably the greatest teacher of philosophy of all time. He just was like a walking encyclopedia for philosophy, greatest ever. He just passed away a couple years ago. In fact, I was in his Republic class. This is it, right? I might be in this video actually. I was in this class that he was doing towards the end, where he was. Most of these were offline though. I don't know why this one's actually online. Most of these were offline. But anyways, he was doing Republic, and we were doing classes after his videos, and then he passed away after Republic 4. He did a couple more videos, and we never did Republic 5. But anyways, this guy said, the reason why I'm even talking about him is he said the most important book of all time is The Republic by Plato. The most world-changing, the book that affects the world the most. That is like what shaped the West is Republic, not Genesis, not New Testament, Gospels, Plato, Republic. That was what he said. That was his words, and I think he's right. So, without further ado, let's read. Where did I put Timaeus? There it is. Let's read Timaeus. And we'll go through Timaeus, and I'm just going to read it through it. And when I see something that I want to talk about, I'll stop and kind of do it like that. Let me see if I have any more super chats. Nope. Okay. So I'm not reading the beginning. I'm going right to beginning the creation stuff. So I think it's Timaeus. Let me see. I think it's, yeah, because this is still coming off of the conversation of Republic. Republic leads into Timaeus. So he's basically like, okay, we just had a great conversation about how to run a state. And he's like, he says, so we could show our state engaged in so suitable war, blah, blah, blah. Now, what about theology, Socrates? What do you want to do about theology? And so Timaeus, our friend Timaeus, he will show no lack of zeal, nor for he have any excuse for refusing to do as you say. Yesterday, in fact, immediately after our return from the guest chamber at Critias' where we are lodging, and earlier still, on our way there, we were considering these very subjects. Critias mentioned to us a story derived from the ancient tradition. And now, Critias, pray tell it to us, our friend here, so that he may help to decide whether or not it's pertinent to our prescribe. Certainly, third partner, Timaeus, approves. Let me just get to that part. Let's see. Where does he start telling the actual? Oh, this is actually kind of, I think this might be important too, this part right here where he says, the greatest of all being which is proper for us now, both payment to our debt, thanks to you, chanted as a duly and truly honor of the goddess on her day of the festival. Talk about the Pantheia, which is actually right now, I think. I think it's right now. This would have, oh no, I'm sorry, early June. Okay, never mind. I'm wrong. All right, so let's see. We got to be getting close. Yeah, it's coming up. Talks about the flood. Talks about, he mentions Atlantis again real quick. Athenian state. Upon hearing this, Solon remarks, yeah, he gets into Atlantis. This is not what I wanted to talk about first, but the flood is important though. And I'm going to come back to this. I want to talk about the flood too, because, here it is. He says, but at a later time there occurred portentous earthquakes and floods, and one grievous day and night befell them. The whole body of our warriors were swallowed up by the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner was swallowed up by the sea and vanished. Wherefore, as the ocean, that spot has now become impossible and unsearchable, being blocked up by the shoal mud which the island created as it settled down. Now, what's interesting about this myth is the flood myths are ubiquitous in these cultures. These flood myths that the world was restarted, and you actually get in Berosus. He says Berosus talks about the flood. He says Belus, upon seeing the vast quite inhabited, although by nature this is a Greek text, by the way. This is a Hellenistic Greek text rewriting old Assyrian mythology for a Greek audience. And then he also talks about this is the Berosus. This is the this is like a transitional fossil, in my opinion, between the old Assyrian and Genesis, because everyone knows that Genesis borrows from like old Akkadian myths, but this is actually where I think most of it comes from, because first of all, you have this 432,000 years thing, and that's a number that shows up in Plato's Republic. This same mathematical 432 divisible and multiplied number. That number is pretty Platonist. You also find it here in the this is called a great year. It's all 12 of the zodiac. When there's like, it's like 72 years is one. 72 years is one. What is it called? One little notch of the zodiac, and 432,000 years is all. It's like 26,000 years for each sign to pass. And like right now we're in the age of Aquarius, whatever. 432 years is called a great year. So it's interesting that this is in here. And then he talks about the manner Chesithros, that's the Noahide, that's the Noah figure. After the death of Ardates, son of Chesithros, succeeded and reigned 8 Sari. In his time happened the great deluge, the story of which is given in this manner. The deity Kronos. And what's interesting about Kronos is in the In the Babylonian Akkadian version, it's Enki. And the Enki and Kronos have a lot of overlap, but this should keep that in mind here. Kronos appeared to him in a vision and gave him notice that upon the 15th day of the month, Dacia, there would be a flood by which mankind would be destroyed. He therefore enjoined him to commit a writing. Whoops, I went the wrong way. Writing of history of the beginning, progress, and final conclusion. I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. He says, after the flood had been upon the earth, it was after the time was abated, Ctesiphros sent out some birds from the vessel, which not finding any food nor any place and their rest, returned to him again. After an interval of some days, he sent forth a second time, and then they returned with their feet tinged with the mud. You find that in Genesis. You also find that in the Akkadian myths. So therefore, he made an opening in the vessel, looking out, the vessel was driven on the side of a mountain. And guess what? Guess where the mountain is? Armenia, which is where Noah lands. So you can see the Greeks knew about this stuff. So when we find it in Genesis, we don't have to go, oh, it came from the Akkadians. No, the Greeks know about this story too. So I just want people to realize that. That's the last part I want to read, I think. This vessel being stranded in Armenia. Blah, blah. And by the way, the name of Deucalion means like vintage wine. So, and it's interesting that you have Noah, who's a tiller and makes a vineyard. So there's some link between, and then the pre-Socratics, the oldest historians that talk about Deucalion say he had 3 sons, and these 3 sons are the progenitors of the Greeks. It's different. It's not the world. Like there's like Pelasgos, a different one, and a different one, and Cthonius, Pelasgos, and I think a different one. And there's 3 of them, and one of them's like the progenitor of the Thessalians. The other one's the Achaeans, and the other one's like the Ionians or something like that. I forgot how they left, but it's basically like very similar to what you find in Noah. And that's not in the Akkadian version. So that's a very specific Greek thing that you find in the Hebrew Bible, the 3 sons of Noah thing. So, all right, now we can get to the theology stuff. We got this flood out the way. Here we go. Therefore, this purpose I've been saying, I've been ready to tell my tale, not in summary outline, but in full detail, just as I heard it. And the city with its citizens, which you described yesterday, were in, as it were, in a fable. We will now transport hither into the realm of fact, for we will assume that the city is that ancient city of ours, and declare that the citizens you conceived are the truth of those actual progenitors of ours, of whom the priest told. Let me just see if I can get into the stuff that I actually want to read. Sorry, I should have had this ready. Here we go. All right. Speech. All right. So Timaeus starts speaking here. Here's what he says. As to that, Socrates, all men who possess even a small share of good sense call upon God. Isn't that interesting? Theos. It's not some particular God. It's not, it's not Uranos, it's not Kronos. It's just Theos, which is what you find in the Bible. God, El, or in the Hebrew Bible, Elohim. And that to me shows you that there are remnants of older Hebrew mythology that are, this is what I think is happening. I think they're rewriting actual Hebrew mythology that are local to Hebrew people, to Jewish people. I'm not saying they're writing this from ex nihilo and just inventing up random stuff, because if they did that, you would find something like this. It wouldn't be so. There's a lot of differences too, but there is this idea that Elohim, which used to be called the gods, plural, is now a singular term being used in a singular sense for a monotheistic God. So we're already starting off with it's monotheistic. Call upon God as the outset of every undertaking, be it small or great. We therefore, who are purposing to deliver a discourse about the universe, how it was created, how happily it's uncreate, must needs invoke gods and goddesses. If so, be that we are not utterly demented. Hold on one second. Praying that all let me just see if I can make this a little bigger so I can see it better. There we go. Praying that all we say may be approved by them in the first place. And secondly, by ourselves, grant then that we thus duly invoke the deities ourselves. We must also invoke so to proceed, that you may most easily learn, and I may most clearly expound my views regarding the subject before us. First of all, must, in my judgment, make the following distinction. This is important. What is that which is existent always and has no becoming? And what is that which is becoming always and never is existent? Now the one of these is apprehensible by thought with the aid of reasoning, since it's ever uniformly existent, whereas the other is an object of opinion with the aid of unreasoning sensation, since it becomes and perishes and is never really existent. And again, everything which becomes must of necessity become owing to some cause. What he's actually saying here is there is a difference between opinions that come and go. So like subjective opinions, subjective thoughts on things that are based on whatever the situation is. So it's really kind of like matters of the flux. But then there are things that are eternal and these pure like being, right? Eternal forms, truths that never change no matter what. He's laying out that this is something that's true that I'm about to say. A cause, it is impossible for anything to attain becoming. But when the artificer of any object, in forming its shape and quality, keeps his gaze fixed on that which is uniform, using a model of this kind, that object, executed in this way, must of necessity be beautiful. This is a really weird translation, by the way. It's like really weird. But whenever he gazes at that which has come into existence and uses a created model, the object thus executed is not beautiful. Okay. He's basically saying if a creator or a demiurge makes something that is based on something that is eternal, unchanging himself, the result will be beautiful. If he makes a model of something that's already created, it will be flawed. So this is what he's getting into. The whole heaven or cosmos, if there has any other name which it especially prefers, by let us call it. So be its name what it may. What do you want to call it? Heaven, the cosmos, space, whatever you want to call it. We must first investigate concerning it that primary question which has been to be investigated at the outset in every case. Namely, whether it has existed always, having no beginning of generation, or whether it has come into existence, having begun from some beginning. It has come into existence, for it is visible and tangible and possessed of a body. So he's saying, like, we can see the world around us, so we know it came into existence, and we know it has a cause. So this is the this is like an ontological argument. And he says, and all such things we are sensible, and things sensible, being apprehensible by opinion with the aid of sensation, come into existence as we saw, and are generated. And that which has come into existence must necessarily, as we say, have come into existence by reason of some cause. Now, to discover the maker and father, that's a very specific word to use to, why is he a father? So what he's called father in the Hebrew Bible and New Testament, and he's called father in Plato. That's interesting. He's not the father in most other traditions in the Near East. This is a very specific thing that's happening here. The father of this universe were a task indeed, and having discovered him, to declare him unto all men were a thing impossible. However, let us return and inquire further concerning the cosmos, after which the models did its architect construct it. After which models did its architect construct it? Was it after the which is self-identical and uniform, or after that which has come into existence? And this is this is actually, this makes a lot of sense if all you know is Hesiod, where the gods come into existence through chaos. He's pinning up what he's about to say against that known model, where the gods are generated through the chaos and created by other gods, created off of creations. The gods are all flawed. Whereas this model is a unchangeable, never moves, at rest, perfect being who makes his model off self-identical model. So it's a model based on perfection. This is a very this is persuading Socrates. So this is how you're gonna, if you want to get Socrates to believe in this, you better make him believe that this is going back to mathematically one source that's perfect, because that's what he would believe. He wouldn't believe in a flawed gods coming through the chaos realm that are creating other gods based on flawed models. So he's basically saying the only way for this to work is if you had one perfect, unchanging, at rest at always creator who makes it off of a model which is perfect. So this is where this is kind of where the Trinity comes from, if you think about it. You have one God who creates a model of himself that uses that model to create all the cosmos. So it creates a dyad, which is a triad. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm just throwing that out there. Now, so if the cosmos is beautiful and its constructor good, it is plain that he fixed his gaze on the eternal. But if otherwise, which is an impious supposition, his gaze was on that which has come into existence. But it is clear to everyone that his gaze was on the eternal. For the cosmos is the fairest of all that has come into existence, and he, the best of all the causes. So having in this wise come into existence, it has been constructed after the pattern of that which is apprehensible by reason, logos, and thought, and is self-identical. So, again, if the premises be granted, it is wholly necessary that this cosmos should be a copy of something. Now, in regard to every matter, it is most important to begin at the natural beginning. Accordingly, in dealing with the copy and its model, we must affirm that the accounts given will themselves be akin to the diverse objects which they serve to explain. Those which deal with its abiding and firm and discernible by the aid of thought will be abiding and unshakable, and insofar it is possible and fitting for statements to be irrefutable and invincible, they must in no wise fall short thereof. Whereas the accounts of that which is copied after the likeness of the model, and is a likeness, and itself a likeness, will be analogous thereto and possess likelihood. For as being is to becoming, so truth is to belief. See? He's basically saying, if being is the answer to becoming, truth is the answer to belief. Aletheia is the antidote to doxa. See? So, wherefore Socrates, if in our treatment of great hosts of matters regarding the gods and the generation of the universe, we prove unable to give accounts that are always in all respects consistent and perfectly exact, be not thou surprised, rather we should be content if we can furnish accounts that are inferior to none in likelihood, remembering both who I speak and you who judge are but human creatures, so that it becomes to us to accept the likely account of these matters and forbear to search beyond it. He's basically saying here, remember, the way we're figuring this out is through logic and reason, but we can't know for sure what it is we're even trying to comprehend because we're just human. This is the Platonist, what is it called? The doctrine. What is it called again? I forgot what it's called. there's a doctrine in Platonism. I forgot what it's called, but it's it means you can't know everything. Like it's why can't I think of the name of it? Anyways, it doesn't matter. I'm drawing a blank right now. Excellent, Timaeus. We must by all means. So this Socrates likes this. He likes this because why? Because Timaeus is getting through. We're figuring out who God is using logic and reason, and it's perfect. It can't be flawed. So it has to be for the universe to be the way it is. It has to be modeled off something perfect too. So Socrates likes this. Socrates likes his methodology. He's like, I'm down. I like this. So, and certainly we have the most cordially accepted your prelude. So now we beg of you, prostrate straight into the main theme. He's like, all right, no more philosophy bullshit. We get it. We understand your methodology is we're going to find God through reason, and the God must be rational, and he must have he must make a model off himself, and he can't just be generated and creating things that are already created. So okay, we're there. We understand that. Here's where the stuff gets big. Let us now state that the cause, wherefore he that constructed becoming and the all. He was good. Agathos. He was the agathos. Now, what's interesting about this word is in the Platonic doctrines that follow, that spring up right around the same time as Christianity. So like Mithraism, Hermeticism, the Chaldean oracles, you have a concept called the agathos daimon, the good daimon. And the agathos daimon is very, very comparable to the Christian God, the way it's described. It's always a triad. It's described as the logos, reason, having three parts, that type of thing. And this is, he uses the term agathos. And in him that is good, no envy arises ever concerning anything. So this God has to be perfect. He can't be jealous. So wait a minute, what am I doing here? Why am I comparing this to the Hebrew Bible? Well, like I said, I don't think the writers of the Hebrew Bible were just writing stuff ex nihilo. I think God being a jealous God might have been some sort of remnant or relic from earlier text from Yahwism that sort of makes its way into the final cut. I think it's redacted through Platonist, with Platonist tendencies to sort of keep up with the philosophical and scientific worldview of the day, whether it be the Zoroastrians in Persian period or the Platonists in the Hellenistic period. I think the redactors are constantly keeping up with what is it that the greatest minds are. What do they think about? Oh, it's one God. Okay, well, Elohim, El Shaddai, Yahweh, we need to figure out how we just got to make them all one, I guess. That's what they do. But then you end up finding the remnants in there. You end up seeing things like Elohim, which is plural. You end up seeing things like different names for God, like El Shaddai and El and Yahweh, and different words, different names for God. And I think those are little remnants of the old Yahwistic stories. And I think they're taking their real Jewish culture. They're not like, it's not like the Greeks are going, here, you got to copy us and write your stories based on what we want. No, these are Jews doing this. But I think they're trying to keep up with the philosophical notions of the day. So that's why you're going to have differences. You're going to have major differences. Some that might even just go right straight up against Plato, like right here. The word he uses is zealotos. Let me see if I can find it. Zealotos, agathos, panta ponis genestai. I thought he uses the word zealotos. I thought he did. Arcane. Ebulthe. Agathos, agathoi, paraudes, ectos, panta. Okay, that is all hoti malista genestai, which is and being devoid of envy. So this is the word they're using right here. Okay. And he desired that it all should be so far as possible like unto himself. This principle then we shall be wholly right in accepting from men and of wisdom as being above all, the supreme originating principle and becoming of the cosmos. For God desired that so far as possible all things should be good and nothing evil. Now, this is what we're going to see when we go to Genesis. When God creates things, he constantly says, in fact, let's go to that right now. Let's pull this up right now. And he said it was good, and he said it was good, and he said it was good. So in the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. Obviously it's just theos in the Greek, and Elohim in Elohim in the Hebrew. Singular, it is plural, but it's used singular, if that makes sense. So like it's the gods are being used as a singular divinity in a way. It constantly refers to Elohim as he, not them. So that's something that we notice in the Hebrew. So it is plural, but it's also being used in a singular way. So what I think that means is it's a trace of the old polytheistic, Yahwistic pantheon, but as it's being rewritten for the up-to-date philosophical audiences. So you have the pneuma on the face of the waters. We already read this part. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. That was good. Kalon. That's another one of the words for good. And let me just, you know what? I think because when Plato calls the god agathos, but I think he uses the word kalon to describe things that he makes are good. So let me just see if I can find that real quick. Yeah, he does actually. Right here, Kalion, right here. He does. So, if I can share my screen, he uses the same words. I mean, that's not that surprising, to be honest, because there's only a few words for good, and he's using Kalion to describe the things that he's making, even though he's called the agathos. He's the good, but when he creates things, they are good. They are kalon. Okay, so back to Genesis real quick. He said it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and called the darkness night. And there was evening, and there was morning, one day. That to me sounds very Parmenidean. Parmenides talks about the light and day being aspects, being like one thing. They're not two different gods, they're one thing. And so that to me, when the way it's described here is kind of ripping off Parmenides a little bit. And then God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning, a second day. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered unto one place, let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called the seas. And God saw that it was kalon. It's good. So he constantly, just like in Timaeus, he keeps making things that are good, and they're good, and they're good, and they're good. That's a very specific thing that we find among Plato and Genesis. All right, so let's keep going. For God desired, so far as possible, all things should be good and nothing evil. Wherefore, when he took over all that was visible, seeing that was not in a state of rest, but in a state of discordant and disorderly motion, He brought it into order out of disorder, deeming that the former state is always a better than the latter. For him who is most good, it neither was nor is permissible to perform any action save what is most fair. He reflected, therefore, he perceived that of such creatures as are by nature visible, none that is irrational will be fairer, comparing wholes with wholes than the rational. And further, the reason cannot possibly belong to any part from soul. So because of this reflection, he constructed reason within soul. So he's constructing logos within the psyche, which is dia de ton logismon, ton de nun men en psyche. Logismo ton de nun men en psyche. It means logos in the soul, logos in psyche. Psychein de o somatai, psychein of from the body. So he says spirit and body. This is actually a dualistic framework, believe it or not. Plato is actually merging the dualistic Zoroastrian Pythagoreans. These are like the really, really smart people of his time period. But then you have the material monists who are like everything came from one thing. And then you have these other Zoroastrians and Pythagoreans who are like everything's body and soul, night and day, darkness and light, male and female, and they're all dualist. So there's a way to unify this, sort of like a triadic way, but it's still monist. It's still monist, but it acknowledges the dualist things it acknowledges the dualist nature of things, but it still goes back to one source. You still have the one. So he says, because this reflection, he constructed reason within soul and soul within body, as he fashioned the all, that so the work he was executing might be of its nature most fair and most good. Thus, then in accordance with the likely account, we must declare that this cosmos has verily come into existence as a living creature, endowed with soul, psyche, and reason, logos, owing to the providence of God. I like that. Look at this. Hutos unde kata logon ton ekota de legen ton de ton cosmon zos zoon. So he's saying the living creature, the living emsukon, the living creature endowed with soul, and nun and te aletheia, which is truth through tain to theou, truth of God. And they translate it as providence of God. But that word aletheia means truth, so that's interesting. So yeah, I like that. I don't know, that's pretty wicked right there, what Plato says right there. That's a hot line right there. That's a bar, if you ask me. The cosmos has verily come into existence as a living creature endowed with soul and reason, owing to the providence of God. This being established, we must declare that which comes next in order, in the semblance of which the living creatures did the constructor of the cosmos construct it. And there's that word. Where is it? I'm just checking out the Greek because I'm trying to see how they translated this. We shall not deign to accept any of those which belong by nature to the category of parts. This is funny. This is what me and Jay Dyer were arguing about, parts. We shall not deign to accept any of those which belong by nature to the category of parts. For nothing that resembles the imperfect would ever become fair. But we shall affirm that the cosmos, more than aught else, resembles most closely that living creature, more than aught of which all other living creatures, severely and generically, are portions. So this is very monistic. This is priority monistic in the sense that everything comes from the one. We all are portion. We all have that portion of the one coming down to us, even at the lowest levels of creation. We all have we're all made in the image of God. That's Platonism, by the way. Adam being made in the image of God is Platonist, and we're going to get there too. I want to get to the world soul first. For that living creature embraces and contains itself all the intelligible living creatures, just as the universe contains us and all other visible living creatures that have been fashioned. For since God desired to make it resemble most closely that intelligible creature, which is fairest of all, and in all ways most perfect, he constructed it as a living creature, one and visible, containing within itself all the living creatures which are by nature akin to itself. Are we right then in describing that the heaven as one, or would it be more correct to speak of the heavens as infinite? Many universes theory. One, it must be termed. So he just says, don't even try to answer that question, Socrates. We don't live in multiple universes. We live in one cosmos. That's it. If it is to be framed after its pattern, if we have one God, there's one universe. That's it. For that which embraces all intelligible living creatures could never be second, with another beside it. And when I read this, no offense, why not? That's what I would have said if I was Socrates. What's your reason for that? Why can't there be two gods? Why can't there be two universes? I really don't know the answer to that question. That's a really good question. I mean, I guess philosophically it would be kind of, I mean, I don't know. How would you... It hurts my brain to even think about that. Anyways, could be with another beside it. For if so, there must need exist a yet another living creature, which should embrace them both, of which they will each be a part. In which case this universe could no longer be rightly described as modeled on these two, but would rather be on a third creature which contains them both. Wherefore, in order that this creature might resemble an all-perfect living creature in respect of its uniqueness, for this reason, its maker made neither two universes nor an infinite number, but there is and will continue to be one generated heaven, unique of its kind. All right, let's keep going. Now, this is where we get to the world soul, I believe. I think it's coming up pretty soon. Now, with which has become into existence must needs be a bodily form, visible and tangible. Yet without fire, nothing could ever become visible, nor tangible without some solidity, nor solid without earth. Hence, in beginning to construct the body with the all, God was making it of fire and earth. But it is not possible that two things alone should be conjoined without a third. For there must needs to be some intermediary bond to connect the two. Some sort of Trinitarian stuff going on there. And the fairest of the bonds is that which most perfectly unites into one both of itself and the things which it binds together. And to effect this in the fairest manner, the natural property of proportion. For whenever the middle term of any three numbers, cubic or square, is such that the first term is to it as to the last term, and again, conversely, as the last term is to the middle, so is the middle to the first, then the middle term becomes in turn the first and the last. Interesting. The first and the last. I am the Alpha and Omega. Doesn't that sound like that a little bit? Then the middle term becomes in turn the first and the last, while the first and the last become in turn the middle terms, and the necessary consequence will be that all the terms are interchangeable. And being interchangeable, they all form a unity. Okay. I'm just looking at the Greek for a second. Now, if the body of the all had to come into existence as a plane surface having no depth, one middle term would have sufficed to bind together both itself and its fellow terms. But now it is otherwise, for it behoved it to be solid of shape, and what brings solids into unison is never one middle term alone, but always two. Thus it was said that the midst between the fire and earth, God set water and air, and bestowed upon them as far as possible. That's kind of sounds like a little bit like our Genesis firmament. Water and air, and then fire. That's kind of what the firmament is designed like. A like ratio, one towards another, air being to water as fire to air, and water being to earth as to water. He joined together and constructed a heaven visible and tangible. For these reasons, and out of these materials, such in kind and four in number, the body of the cosmos was harmonized by proportion and brought into existence. These conditions secured it for the amity, so that being united in identity with itself, become indissoluble by any agent other than him who bound it together. Okay. Now, the four elements, the construction of the cosmos had been taken up the whole of every one. For its constructor had constructed of it all the fire and water and air and the earth that existed. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. He's a little redundant here. What I really want to get to is this world soul part. I know it's coming up. It's not far into it. But he is getting very redundant with this, with some of the things he's saying. All right. So, generated to be a blessed God. Here we go. Okay. Such then was the sum of reasoning for the ever-existing God concerning the God which was one day to be existent, whereby he made it smooth and equal and even on all sides from the center, a whole and perfect body compounded of perfect bodies. And in the midst thereof, he set soul, and he stretched throughout the whole of it. And therefore he enveloped also the exterior of its body. And as a circle, revolving in a circle, he established one soul in solitary heaven, able of itself because of its excellence to company with itself and needing none other beside, sufficing unto itself as acquaintance and friend. And because of all this, he generated to be a blessed God. There's that word, eudaimona, theon. That's a word that Aristotle uses for the thing you're trying to attain in life, eudaimonia. Plato uses it to describe the God. So what's interesting about that is one of the big differences between Christianity as a world philosophy and, let's say, Aristotelian, is Aristotle says you should strive to be good in life and seek eudaimonia. And Christians say you should strive to be with the good God, the eudaimon theon. So one of them saying you should be like, live like a God or be good. The other one's saying just follow God. But they both have the idea, they're both getting at something very similar. Christianity just thinks the way to live eudaimonia is through Christ. Whereas the Greeks would say, just do it. Just live that way. Just be like that. 10 days. I'm sorry. And as regards to the soul, although we are essaying to describe it after the body, God did not likewise plan it to be younger than the body, for when uniting them, he would not have permitted the elder to be ruled by the younger. But as for us men, even as we ourselves partake largely of the accidental and casual, so also do our words. God, however, constructed soul to be older than body and prior in birth and excellence, since she was to be the mistress and ruler, and it ruled. And he made her of the materials and in the fashion of which I now should describe. So this is like an Adam and Eve thing going on here. You have a male and female, body and soul. And what's so interesting about what happens in Genesis is in him comes Zoe or Hava, Eve, comes from Adam. So Adam, which means like red earth or man or mankind, in the body, he's a body, but in him is like a soul, a spirit. And this is and he literally describes it as a her. And she comes from out of him. And he made her of the materials and in the fashion which I should now describe. Midway between the being, which is indivisible and remains always the same, and the being, which is transient and divisible in bodies, he blended a third form of being compounded out of the twain, that is to say, out of the same and the other, and in like manner he compounded it midway between one of them, which is indivisible, and that which is divisible in the bodies, and he took three. This guy's redundant, dude. And blend them all together into one form. He could have just said that one time. You don't have to say it three times different ways. By forcing the other into unity, he says it again. In spite of it being naturally difficult to mix. And when the aid of being, and with the aid of being, he had mixed them. We know we mixed them. He just told us that 4 times. And he made them one out of 3. Straightway he began to distribute the whole thereof into so many portions as was meet. And each portion was a mixture of the same and the other of being. And he began making the divisions as such. First, he took one portion from the whole, and then he took a portion of the double, and a third portion, half as much as, again, the second portion, that is 3 times. This is really redundant. But this is important, though. I want to show you something that there's some sort of Trinitarian model that develops from this into Middle and Neoplatonism as these ideas progress. When you look at the Gnostics, let me see if I think I had the page ready to go. I don't know what I did with it. Hippolytus. Here it is. This is from Hippolytus against the Gnostics. He's talking about Valentinus. And Valentinus, however, and the adherents of his school, this is from the early 2nd century, early to mid 2nd century. So this is very early on. This is pretty much the second generation of Christians outside of the Christians who Jesus, like, this is like before this is the first generation of Christianity that's like seriously recorded in history, besides the Gospels and Paul. Valentinus and his adherents of the school, though they agree in asserting the originating principle of the universe is the Father, they still are impelled into the adoption of a contrary opinion respecting him. For some of them maintain that the Father is solitary and generative, while others hold the impossibility of procreation without a female. They therefore add Sige, as the spouse of his father, and style the Father himself Bythus. That's not the part that I wanted to read. This is the part that I wanted to read. From this Father and his spouse, some allege that there have been 6 projections. And these are dyads. There are 3 or 6 dyads. Nous and Aletheia, so mind and truth. Logos and Zoe, the word, and that's in John 1, by the way. Logos and Zoe. Anthropos and Ecclesia, so man and church. And that constitutes the procreative Ogdoad. And the Valentinians maintain that these are the first projections. And this is where you can see where they get these ideas from. This is very Platonist. That's what I wanted to say. I just wanted to show you that. Anyways, I see the super chats. I'll get to them in a second. I'm going to finish off this part before I get to Genesis, because we're getting closer to that world soul. Here we go. And after that, he went on to fill the intervals, powers of 2, the intervals of the series of powers in 3 in following manner. We get it. You don't have to keep telling us about these intervals. But by the way, these intervals do have the same mathematics that you find in Berosus. with the 4-3, it's the same mathematics, 2-4-3, that type of thing. So something that's pretty interesting. And thus, okay, here we go. Let's see. This is interesting too, this part. People will talk about this all the time, the cross thing. Next, he split all that is that he had put together into two parts lengthwise, and he laid the twain one against the other, the middle of one and the middle of the other, like a great cross. Some people think this is like some secret esoteric pre-Christian thing. I don't know about that, but it's pretty interesting. It is interesting. I think it's worth bringing up, maybe. And bent either of them in a circle and joined them. Let's see. I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit more, because he's very, very redundant with the doubles and triples. This is like a lot. He talks about this for a long time. So, and when the construction of the soul had been completed to the satisfaction of its constructor, or the demiurge, he then fabricated within all corporal, and uniting them to center, he made them fit together. And the soul, being woven throughout the heaven every way from the center to its extremity, and enveloping in it a circle from without, and herself, revolving within herself, began a divine beginning of unceasing and intelligent life. There's that word Zoe, dude. And it's Eve. Like, what? I literally think there's Eve in this story. There's a version of Eve in Plato's Timaeus. Right here. And soul, being woven through the heaven of every way of the center and to the extremity, and enveloping in a circle from without, and herself revolving within herself, began a divine beginning of unceasing and intelligent Zoe, or Hava, lasting throughout all time. So, let me just see if I can find. Let me just read that Greek to you real quick. Here we go. Right here. Let's just keep going. Hold on. Lasting throughout all time. And whereas the body of the heaven is visible, the soul is herself invisible, but partakes in reasoning and in harmony, having come into existence by the agency of the best of things intelligible and ever existing, the best of things generated. Insomuch that she is compound, blended of the natures of the same and the other being. These three portions is properly divided and bound together, and revolves back upon it herself whenever she touches anything which is of substance dispersed, or anything which has its substance undivided. She is moved throughout her whole being, and announces what the object is identical with, and from what is different, and in relation wherein, how, and when it comes about to each thing exists, and it is acted upon by others, both in the sphere of the becoming and in the ever uniform. So, right here, when the Father had then engendered it, proceeded in motion and alive, a thing of joy to the eternal gods. Look at this. Hos te kinten, kinethen, auto kai zoen. Alive. I mean, it's alive. Does that make it Eve? No. But I mean, there's something about Eve that I think is modeled off the Platonic model. The fact that it's alive, it's life, it's Zoe. And it comes from within the body that he creates. He creates this body that is both soul and matter. And the female aspect is the life aspect, and it's spirit. So I think there's two things happening. The New Testament rewrites this for the middle Platonic worldview, and Genesis writes it for the regular Old Academy Platonic worldview. But they both have an Adam and Eve, and they both have a one God that creates everything, modeled off of a living creature, right?
He too rejoiced, and being well pleased, he designed to make it resemble its model still more closely. Accordingly, seeing that the model is an eternal living creature. Eternal living creature. Oh. He set to making this universe so far he could of a like kind. But insomuch as the nature of living creature was eternal, this quality it was impossible to attach its entirety to what is generated. Wherefore he, hang on one second. Let me just here it is right here. Emenon to zou phusis. Eternal Ionios. Yeah, there's so much in here that lines up with Genesis and also in John. This quality was impossible, and wherefore he planned to make a movable image of eternity. What's interesting about this eternity thing, Ionos, is one of the gods that competes with Christianity is the cult of Ion. And Ion is exactly what they're describing here. A god who's made, his name is Ion, and he's like the mediator between the one and all of other. He's like it's a very Platonic version of, it's like we don't know much about it. We only have very fragmentary we don't know much about it. But, and he's born of a virgin, by the way, in Phanes. But it's just funny how in Plato's Timaeus, one of the names he's given is eternity. Ionos. And as he set in order to heaven of that eternity, which abides in unity, he made an eternal image, moving according to number, even that which he have named time. Interesting. Chronon, right there. There's chrono. For simultaneously with the construction of the heaven, he contrived the production of days and nights and months and years, which existed not before the heaven which came into being. Now, I want to stop here for 1 second and pull up a different source from Plato. And I want to show you something he said. He said something really fascinating in a different book. It's called The Statesman. And so this is Socrates, though. So Socrates says, hold on, is this the right one? Oh, wait, am I on the wrong page of statements? Hold on a second. Yeah, oh, this is it right here. Okay. He says, Socrates says, certainly that follows from what preceded, but what was the life in what was the life in the reign of Kronos? We just heard about Kronos, time being created. It's more of it's not really the deity Kronos in Plato, though. It's more of like a concept or a form that results from the creation of the world soul. But anyways, this is interesting what he says here. In the life in the reign of, this is talking about the golden age before the flood. This is the golden age before the flood when Kronos was the ruler of the cosmos. What was life like in the golden age of Kronos, which you mentioned in the previous period of revolution? For evidently the change in course of the stars and the sun takes place in both periods. You have followed my account very well. No, the life about which you ask, when all the fruits of the earth sprang up from their own accord, and men did not belong at all to the present period of revolution, but this also belonged to the previous one. For then in the beginning, God ruled. Now listen, look at that. He doesn't say, he changes from, he asks about the golden age of Kronos, but what does he says? He just says, forget all that nonsense. In the beginning, when God ruled, he uses the word theos. Ready? Right here. Right here. Oleso theos. We're not talking about Kronos anymore, are we? We're talking about a singular,
unnamed god called Theos. He supervised the whole revolution, and again, in the same way, all the parts of the universe were divided by regions among gods who ruled them. This is a retelling of the Kronos myth. It's like, no, actually, Kronos wasn't in charge. God was in charge. That's why it was a golden age. Here's what happened. And moreover, the animals were distributed by species and flocks among inferior deities as divine shepherds. There's a hierarchy of divinities. You can call them angels. In fact, Philo says this. If we go to Philo literally says, you guys call them demons, we call them angels. You guys call them daimons, we call them angels. Philo on dreams. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Here, check this out. Just to do, I'm going to go back to this text in 1 second. Philo does say, though, on dreams, he says, they're called daimonas, right here. Tautas daimonas. These are called daimons. What the Greeks called daimons by the philosophers, he's talking about the Greeks, philosophoi, hodehieros logos angelos. We call them, the sacred record, hieros logos, the holy word of angels. So daimons are angels. They're the same thing. That the whole divinity, the division between demons and angels is a later Augustine creation of Christianity. Actually, I guess you could say it started with Justin Martyr. But Philo, even as early as late as Philo, they all believed in the same shit. So he's talking about these distributed by daimons. Look at right here, daimonas, and it's translated as deities, but it's daimonas. See the word, daimonas. So God's in charge. This is the golden age, right? This is what Plato says. During the golden age, God was in charge, and under him, all the daimons were in charge of little sections of the universe. Some of them ruled the animals. Some of them ruled the plants. Some of them ruled humans. This is what he says. And they were divine shepherds, each of whom was in all respects to the independent guardian of creatures under his own care, so that no creature was wild, nor did they eat one another. And there was no war among them, nor any strife whatsoever. To tell all the other consequences of such an order of the world would be an endless task. But the reason for the story of spontaneous life of mankind is as follows. God himself was their shepherd. See that? Theos emen atos epistaton. Epistaton. Let me fix that accent. Theos emen atos epistaton. God himself was their shepherd, watching over them. Just as man, being an animal of different and more divine than the rest, isn't that interesting? Notice how Genesis makes man, human, Adam and Eve, the ruler of all animals and plants. He's on top of everything. Just look what Plato says right here. Man, being an animal of different and more divine nature than the rest. Humans are above all the other animals and plants in the hierarchy of being. Then comes the daimones. Then would come the heroes, the deified heroes. Then comes the daimones. Then comes the celestial or terrestrial, and then the highest gods, and then God. There's a whole hierarchy. There's like 9 levels, I think there is. Now tends the lower species of animals, and under his care there were no states, nor did men possess wives or children, nor they all came to life again on earth. Guess who gets heavily influenced by this particular text? Let me make my screen big for this part. Believe it or not, guess who read this text and says, we need to bring this back? Karl Marx. This is influencing Marxism. Isn't that crazy? Plato has influence on Marx, dude, because it's a reading about the Golden Age where everyone shared all their stuff. And by the way, Christians do this first. Thousand years before Karl Marx came along, Christians were already trying to bring us back to the Golden Age, where everyone was equal, where there was no states, there were no kings, and I'm sorry, I know the medieval period that changes. I'm just saying, like, this is what they wanted at first, before Roman Christianity. I'm talking about early Christianity. They wanted no states. They wanted everyone to be under one kingdom, under Christ, everyone to share their wealth. Read Acts 4. It's right there. Acts 4. I can pull it up in a second. And under their care, they all came to life again out of the earth with no recollection of their former lives. So there were no states nor families, but they had fruits in plenty from the trees and other plants, which the earth furnished them of its own accord without the help of agriculture. And they lived for the most part in open air, without clothing or bedding, for the climate was tempered to their comfort, and the abundant grass that grew out of the earth furnished them soft couches. This is literally paradise. Socrates was the life of men in the reign of Kronos, but the life of the present age, which is said to be the age of Zeus, you know by your own experience. Would you be able and willing to decide which of them is more blessed? Certainly not. So this was a golden age where no one had to work and where everyone was equal, where everyone was pretty much the same. So real quick, let me go to John real quick, because what John's trying to do here is John is trying to rewrite Genesis with the Middle Platonist worldview. So Genesis has the old Platonist worldview. John has the Middle Platonist, the first century Alcinous, Philo, Maximus of Tyre, Plutarch. Those guys think this is what they think. This is the updated scientific cosmology. Genesis has to be rewritten. This is what they're doing here. So in the beginning, you have the Logos, or the world soul, literally the world soul, and the Logos was with Theos, and Logos was divine. Wait, why do I have no Greek here? Give me my Greek. Put my Greek back. And see, and they both start off with NRK. NRK. Utos hen NRK pros ton deum. In arche was the world soul, was Logos. But here's the thing. So why didn't it say world soul here or living creature here? Why not? Because this is Middle Platonism now. Middle Platonism adopts Stoicism, and the Stoics don't use the term world soul anymore. They call it logos, or reason, pure reason. So the world soul is the logos. It's just the updated version of it. And this is what you get in John. So John the logos is a new Adam. It is a new Adam. All things were made through him. And here's the kicker. En autoi zoe. En kai e zoe en topos ton anthropon. And in him was Eve. It's literally what it says. Zoe is the Greek word for Eve, but it's entered as life. And remember, we just saw Plato talk about this. We just saw Plato in Timaeus describe the world soul being a dyad, being a body with a female life aspect of soul within him. And within this world soul is everything that comes about, all of life. Eve is the mother of all life, and Adam is the father of all life. So I just wanted to show you that, and I want to also real quick. Let me go to John real quick, or I'm sorry, Acts 4. Acts 4. Where is it? Here it is. And the multitude of them that believed were one heart and soul. And none of them said that they ought of the things which he possessed was his own, but they had all things in common. Koina, common. That's why the word koine means common Greek. And with great power gave the apostles their witness, the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and a great grace was upon them all. Charis. For neither was there among them that any lacked. For as many as they were, possessors of lands and houses sold them, and brought the prices of things that were sold, and they laid them at the feet of the apostles, and distribution was made unto each according as anyone had need. That's the golden age, dude. That's the Platonic paradise, the golden age, brought back through Christ. Because when you're being ruled by God, the golden age comes back. That's the idea. The kingdom of heaven is literally going back to paradise, being back in the garden again. That's the kingdom of heaven. That's the idea, at least. All right. Go back to, we're going to go to Genesis in a second, but I want to finish off. Actually, let's go to Genesis right now. So, as you can see, he creates everything, and he creates all the animals and stuff, and all the, he's creating everything, right? And then, in Genesis 2, you get this rib thing, right? I'm jumping ahead of myself. Here it is. And Jehovah God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the pneuma of Zoe. The pnoen Zoes, the breath of life. And man became a living soul. Living soul. Sukain Zoason. We just saw that in Plato. The soul, the living soul. And this is an anthropos, right? The man. And you see it's the Adam. Ha-Adam. And that word, ha-Adam, it's this noun is weird because it doesn't necessarily mean man. Like there's other words for man. Ish means man. It doesn't say, and he created Ish from this. They could have said that, but they used a very specific word, Adam, which means like the earth, the red earth. It's the world. It's the world soul. They use the word Adam, which I think translates the living creature from Plato, or world soul, however you want to translate that. I think it encapsulates that the best. Better than Ish wouldn't work. And look at the word anthropos. It's the same thing in the Greek, on the Greek side, because they transliterate it. Adam, they don't call him anthropos. They call him anthropos right here, but he ends up just being Adam when he gets watched. He gets named. So you know it's not a translation of Hebrew. This is how you know it's a translation of Hebrew, by the way. And Jehovah God planted a garden eastward in Eden. And there he put the man who he had formed. So he's still the man. He's still the anthropon, right? He's still the anthropon. And out of the ground made Jehovah God to grow every tree that is pleasant to sight and good for food, the tree of life, also in the midst of the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. No stone, kalu, kai, poneru, not knowledge of gnosis and evil. Gnosis of kalu and evil, and good and evil. I'm going to fix the light in 1 second. So then he says, he tells them, you can eat from this tree, but the tree of knowledge, good and evil, you can't eat. So remember, right now, everything's perfect. Here's that term again, living creature. And out of the ground Jehovah God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them unto the man. And look at, now he uses the term Adam here. Isn't that interesting? Ha-Adam. Here they translated it correctly. And brought them unto the man to see that what he would call them. And whatsoever the man called every living creature, that was the name thereof. Isn't that interesting? So there's your Sukain Zosan, living creature. So there's all this stuff lining up with Plato in Genesis, especially on the Greek side, but even the Hebrew still portrays the concepts perfectly with Ha-Adam and and Hava. You know what I mean? And here we go. And Kai Ekalesen Adam, and Adam. It just says and the man. But Adam gave the name to all the cattle and to the birds and to every field. Adam is in charge of all the animals, just like we saw in that text from Plato and the Statesman. And then Jehovah caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh thereof. And the rib which Jehovah had taken from the man, he made a woman. Now, what's interesting about this is this is actually hearkening back to something that is very ancient and very Babylonian, Akkadian, whatever you want to say, Sumerian even. There's a myth where Ninhursag, the goddess Ninhursag, takes a piece of the rib of Enki to make humans with it. So there's something happening here where this whole rib concept, this is a remnant of ancient Near Eastern mythology being retold through this Platonic thing. Now watch what happens here. What happens after Adam becomes a being that learns from knowledge? He becomes ashamed. Look at, they were both naked, the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed. You know what's interesting about that? The only culture that was not ashamed of nakedness were the Greeks, believe it or not. The Greeks did not care about nakedness. So the Olympic Games, everyone was naked. So it's funny because this is a Greek ideal that you see here. The idea that when you're perfect, if you're perfect in your mind and you don't have any flaws and you're like God and you haven't eaten from the tree of good knowledge of evil yet, well, nakedness doesn't matter. And this is reflecting the Greek ideal, in my opinion. This is very weird for someone from the Near Eastern to say this, because in Near East, in Eastern Persian culture, nakedness was seen as abomination. You had to be dressed properly. So a lot of this screams Greek idealism. Let me read some of these super chats real quick. How did Russell Grimmerkin deal with Hellenistic dualities like Genesis 3:2, since the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil? I think I'm about to get there. This is perfect timing. Let me just fix my light real quick. Okay. So to answer your question, how did Russell Grimmerkin deal with Hellenistic dualities like Genesis 3:22? Since man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. So this is exactly how he deals with it. Good question. Because there's two Adams. There is the Adam. Here, let me just, before I even continue. Let me show something. Let me pull something up real quick. Adam Kadmon. So in Kabbalah, they deal with this. And by the way, the first person to deal with this concept is not even hold on a second. Let me just find something out for you. Adam Kadmon is the primordial man, or Adam Allah. The Most High Man is abbreviated in here it is. Philo. The first to use the expression original man or heavenly man was Philo, in whose view this genikos or uranios anthropos, the heavenly man, as being born in the image of God, has no participation in any corruptible or earth-like essence, whereas the earthly man is made of loose material called a lump of clay. The heavenly man, as the perfect image of the Logos, is neither the man nor woman, is neither man nor woman. So, okay. And this becomes a major doctrine for Kabbalah, by the way. Major doctrine for Kabbalah. That there's no mistake, like the documentary hypothesis states, that this is actually perfectly planned out by the authors of Genesis. That in Genesis 2 that we just read, before Eve was taken from Adam, before this happened, before the rib was taken out, Adam was one being. He was not male or female. He was both. And the reason why we can say this, the reason why we can actually say this is because when you actually look at the text, look at this. Setting out from the duplical biblical account of Adam, who was formed in the image of God, in Genesis 1:27, and of the first man whose body God formed from the earth, 2:7. So so there, it looks like there's a contradiction here. Is he made in the image of God, and is he pure spirit, like it says in Genesis 1:27? Let's look at Genesis 1:27 real quick. Genesis 1:27. Watch this. Genesis 1:27, which is, and God created man in his own image, in the image of God created he him, male and female, he created him. Now this sounds like, some people think this is a mistake, or it's written weird, or it's, what is he doing? Is this about marriage? Even Christians go, marriage is no gay marriage allowed. It says it right there. Genesis 1:27. He made them male and female. He created them. Well, no, actually, Philo didn't agree with this. Philo says he made an Adam, a living soul called Adam, Ha-Adam, right here. He made an image, a world soul called Adam that was male and female. See what happened there? He made an Adam that was male and female. And the reason why we can actually say this actually kind of makes sense is because when you get to Genesis 2:7, Genesis 2:7, all of a sudden he makes, what is it? Genesis 2:7, I think it is. And Jehovah made man. Now he's making man again? What? Jehovah made man from the dust of the ground, and he breathed life into him? But wait a minute. I thought Adam was already created. You already created Matt. He already created God. I'm sorry. In Genesis 1:27. In fact, let's go back. I want to drill this in your head. Watch this. Genesis 1:27. And God created man, or it's Adam if you check the Greek, or check the Hebrew. And God created Adam in his own image. And if you read that platonically, and God created the living creature, the world soul, the living creature, in his own image. This is what it says. He modeled it off of himself. That's why I said in the beginning, we're going to read through this philosophical jargon before he tells the story. It's really important because he tells Socrates, it's very important that you understand, our God models life after himself. He says it like 10 times. Like, you can't miss it. It's the most doctrinal, dogmatic thing about Platonism, is that human life is made in the image of God. And it's right here in Genesis. Can't miss it. 1:27, God creates Adam in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created a being that was male and female. Then, the next chapter, this is why the documentary hypothesis thinks there's two texts happening. They literally think this is two texts being written and they're being combined together. Like these people are a bunch of idiots that don't know how to edit text. Like, duh, hey, I got look at two texts. Let's see. Here, I'll do it like this. This is what documentary hypothesis think they're doing. They think that I got 2 texts. No, I've been making 1 text. No, we got 1. Like they squished together 2 texts to make 1 text, and they just left all the contradictions in there. I'm not necessarily sold on that. I think they might have purposely wrote it this way. Because Jehovah 2:7, this is documentary hypothesis, this is what they say. The reason why they think there's 2 texts here is they go, wait a minute, why is he creating Adam again? I thought we already had Adam. So I get why they think that. But this is a physical, fleshly Adam. This is the second Adam that's being created here. And if you read it through the lens of Platonism, this makes perfect sense. So he takes this new Adam that he creates with dust and coal and on the ground and breathes life into him. And what does he do? He pulls a rib out of him and makes a female from it, called a woman. This is now the bone of my bones, the flesh of my flesh. She shall be called a woman, because she has been taken out of man. So, and now this is still the golden age, though, because they're both naked and they're not ashamed of it. Now, to answer your question with 322, when you get to 322, behold, the man has become one of us to know good and evil. And now lest he put forth his hand and take also the tree of life and eat and live forever. So the golden age ends. The golden age ends because Adam was not obedient. And now, whatever. That's all the nonsense. I don't really care about that. I'm not really here for that. But yeah, Russell Gmerkin deals with that by saying this is Platonic. There's 2 Adams here. There's one Adam that's spiritual, and then the second Adam that is corruptible is the earthly lesser Adam. So the first Adam is the Logos. He's still there, and he never gets cast out of paradise. He's just there from the beginning. And the Christians should technically agree with this, but they don't. They just think there's one Adam. But technically, I think the author of John thought this. I think this is exactly what the author of John thought, actually. Thank you for the super chat. The Abrahamic traditions are the republic in practice. If you understand this, you would not put so much stock in religion. The dates of the republic and early Christian literature conspicuous too. Oh, I do think the Christianity is the republic in practice. I do. I talk about this all the time. I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, it even talks about having bishops and overseers. Like, instead of having, you have one philosopher king, it's like a pope, and then he has all these bishops that are like running all the states inside in the republic. It's very much a religious theocracy system. That's exactly what it is. Republic. 100%. That's what that is. So thank you for that super chat. I agree. Deburned. Thank you for the super chat. Monas stole the Logos, math, and Demiurge, physics, stripped out the Pharmacon, and sold us a dead mud man in the garden. Well, about the Pharmacon thing, because you find in early Christian literature the language of Pharmacon as like the remedy to the soul of salvation. So there is like a pharmacy, there's a Pharmacon aspect in it. And you even have in Hippolytus about the Gnostics definitely kept, they actually literally use drugs in their Eucharist. Marcus, Hippolytus. Check this out. Marcus. Let me see if I can pull my screen. I think it's over here somewhere. So Marcus was this dude who carrying operations by sleight of hand, by demons. His heretic allegedly resided in him the mightiest power from invisible and unnameable places, and very often taking a cup, offering up a Eucharistic prayer, prolonging to a greater length than the usual word of invocation. He would cause the appearance of a purple, sometimes red mixture, so that the dupe has imagined that a certain grace descended from the communicated potion of blood-led potency. Long story short, these drugs, however, possess the quality of furnishing the effect that we had previously mentioned in the book on magicians. He would give these women a Eucharist, and they would trip out on whatever drug he was giving us. There was drugs in Eucharist in early Christianity. It just was seen as heresy by the ruling elites that really were in power, the real church, like the church that was actually like, you know, in power by senators and stuff like that. So the everyday Joes that were practicing Christianity were into that shit for sure. The higher ups were not. They were like, that's not how we're going to run this. We're not going to do that. So thank you for that. Thank you, Brittany Paul, for the $2. I appreciate that. I really appreciate the super chats tonight. You guys are awesome. Aristotle, thank you for the $5. Any chance that separating man from woman is taken from Aristophanes in Plato's Symposium? I was actually going to bring this up. I swear to God I was going to bring this up. So let me see. Let me pull it up right now. It is from, let me see if I can find Aristophanes. Symposium. Oh yeah, I'm looking up duh. What am I doing? Symposium. So I think it is, let me see. Let me just share my screen. This is actually a really perfect time to bring this up right now. Perfect timing. So I believe it is 18.9c. Let me see. 18.9c. 18. Oh, this is a different lettering system. Oh, 189c. No, that's right. No, this is the right system. 189c. Submit. Okay. So Aristophanes, Breach of Aristophanes. Well, now, I do intend to speak differently from the way both you and Pausanias spoke. You see, it sent me that people have completely failed to perceive the power of love. Since if they had realized it, they would have built the biggest temples and altars to his name. I'm talking about Eros, by the way, the god Eros, and perform the biggest sacrifices, not as now when none of these is done for him, though he deserves it most of all. For he is the most benevolent of gods, being man's ally and healer of those ills when cured, be the source of the greatest happiness of the human race. Is this not it? It's coming up. It's coming up. Okay. For once upon a time, our natural form was, here it is, not the same as we have now, but different. First of all, there were 3 kinds of human beings, not 2 as now, male and female, but in addition there was a 3rd kind, of one which combined the nature of both of these, which name still exists, but the kind itself has disappeared. For at that time there was one kind which was androgynous in form, and had a name common to both male and female, but the name no longer exists except as a term of reproach. Secondly, the form of each human being was completely round, and its back and sides being formed in a circle, and had 4 hands. By the way, you know what's so crazy about this? The world soul is described as a sphere, a circle, circular. This is they're describing the perfect world soul, or the perfect first human being that doesn't have any flaws, because it's like there's no dialectic, it's all perfection. It's perfect in ratio and everything like that. Perfect in symmetry. That's what this is. This is the form of a human, the form of the perfect human right now, not male or female. You know, perfect in symmetry, perfectly round. Everything's perfect, right? Circular neck, single head, 2 faces, which had face in opposite directions, 4 ears, 2 sets of genitals, and all the rest that you might guess from all this. It walked upright as now in whichever direction was required, and when it started to run quickly, just as tumblers begin bringing their legs around upright, turn head over heels in a circle, they were quickly carried around in circular motion, supporting themselves on what were 8 limbs. So, this primordial human being that was in the beginning this is what is described in Genesis and in Plato. So, yeah, that's what I think is going on here. Let's go back to Timaeus. Okay, I'm just looking to see if I want to keep going. Okay. See, now he creates the sun and the moon he placed in the first circle of the earth, the sun in the second above the earth, and the morning star, Venus. And the star called sacred to Hermes, which is Mercury, he placed in those circles. So he creates all the orbits and the planets and so forth. So, here we go. What page is this? The role of the world artificer, the demiurge, is similar to. Oh, this is the commentary, but this is worth reading though. The role of the world artificer, the demiurge, is similar to that of Anaxagorean nous, reason, as I already talked about earlier. He is not a creator in the strict sense, but that is to say, he does not make things ex nihilo, but only imposes order and system on pre-existing chaos. Nor does he continue to act directly in proportionate persona throughout the process of world building, but at a certain stage hands over his task to the curated star gods and retires in his primal solitude. So this is like, this is different. This is not the same as the old pagan religions, man. This is, I mean, it's almost like a deistic system where the gods are just beings underneath this like perfect one god who just sets everything. It's Aristotle's unmoved mover in a way. This at least was the mythical narrative tells us, but later on we hear of God in the singular and the divine power as well as the gods in the plural. Where else do you see this? Genesis, Elohim, the power, the God and power is in plural. And then you get El as just the singular God or Yahweh. Taking an active part in the operations marked by rational purpose. The chief characteristic of the demiurge is his goodness. He aims always at the best. He is, in fact, the embodiment of the good, regarded as efficient cause. This inevitably reminds us of the famous passage in the Republic which describes the self-good, or supreme idea of good, or the form of good, as the source of all knowledge and all existence, the sun of intelligible sphere. And many interpreters of Platonism have identified the demiurge with this idea or form. But if the demiurge is the form of the good, what then is the model or pattern, paradigma, in the view which operates as the self-animal, the world, or the living creature or world soul? Surely it must be an idea and a final cause, the idea of the good, in which cause the demiurge cannot be this or any idea. And in general, we may say that the ideas are described as objects of intelligence, not intelligences, whereas the demiurge obviously is an intelligence. Consequently, there would seem to be no way of maintaining this identification of the demiurge with the idea of the good, except by supposing that there is no real
distinction before the demiurge and his model, he being one subject, an object, intellect and intelligible, equivalent, in fact, to Aristotle's deity. That's what I just said. Thought, thinking upon thought. But there is no hint in the text of the Timaeus that this is Plato's meaning. A more plausible identification finds the demiurge in the cause of the mixture, as expounded in Philebus 23. Many phrases of which echo the language of the Timaeus, describing the efficient cause of a demiurgic power, veritable and divine reason. The primary operation of the demiurge is to construct the world soul, or living creature, as it's translated in this stupid translation. I wish I had a better translation up here. In this description, and they actually change. Whoever wrote the commentary already changes it. In his description in this process, Plato mixes myth with mathematics in a peculiar, baffling way. The world soul is said to be composed of three elements: sameness, otherness, and being, or the indivisible or changeless essence, the divisible, and the third essence of which mean proportional between these two. So it's, you can see the elements of Trinitarianism are already as early as Plato himself. And John Dillon confirmed this with me when I talked to him. Because I was like, you know, everyone talks about the Trinity like it's like after Plotinus. Like everyone, this is what everyone says. And I said to him, I see it in Philo. I read Philo, and Philo clearly says you have God the Father, you have the Logos, and then he says you have an intermediary spirit in between both of them. It's right there in Philo. And John Dillon goes, it's even earlier than that. It's in Plato himself. And I was like, really? Yeah. And he told me that. I looked it up. I was like, holy shit, it's so clear. The Trinity is there right away. It's as early as day one. It's just not the Trinity like in a Christian sense. It's very different than that. I'm not saying it's the Trinity, but I'm saying the elements of the Trinity are there. The inspiration behind the Trinity is Plato day one. It's right there. The world soul is said to... Oh, I already read that part. This fact, together with mathematical details of construction, suggests that the main purpose of the doctrine of the world soul is to supply an explanation of heavenly bodies, their revolutions and periods, and the circle of same being that of the fixed stars, circles of other of those 7 planets. The precision relation of reason to soul is frequently left obscure. If the demiurge is reason personified, or logos personified, as one seems bound to suppose, and also the constructor of a soul, it appears to follow that reason is separate from soul and prior thereto. On the other hand, if soul is the first cause of motion and reason possesses motion, soul must be prior to reason. To resolve this apparent contradiction, it seems best to regard reason as a species of soul or a part of soul. Okay, great. Oh, and another thing I wanted to mention is that both Genesis and Plato's Timaeus are trying to, it seems like the goal is to explain the problem of evil, death, decay, and imperfection without blaming God. You have a perfect God who's there who makes everything perfect. Everything's paradise. They both do this. And then there's some reason, there's something that happens that says it's not his fault. And in Genesis, it's the fall, it's the what do you call it? It's the, getting cast out of paradise. And in Platonism, it's the absence of God. So it's after you have the world soul, and the world soul creates the next thing, and the next thing everything starts off, and the cosmos are in motion. It's just the negation of the good. So I think they actually have a better way to solve it. It's just you have good, and then you have the negation of good. But they're both trying to explain how you can have a good world, ultimately good world,
And some things are, and why are we dying? Or why is there decay? Why is there flux? Well, it's because boom, boom, boom. And they give you the reasons. So thank you for that super chat, by the way. Perfect timing, by the way. Perfect timing for that. Letheus, thank you for the $2. Alexander found naked Indian civ gymnosophist. Yeah, I actually mentioned this in the beginning when I showed the let me pull that up again. The prologue to Diogenes Laertius, where he describes the he says the discipline of philosophy, some say origin of the barbarians. The Persians, they say, had their magi. The Babylonians and Assyrians had their Chaldeans. The Indians, their naked sages. That's literally what the word gymnosophist translates to. Gymno means naked. Sophist means sages. The naked sages. The gymnosophist. Yeah, the Celts had their druids. So, and he mentions Zoroaster in here being 5,000 years before the Trojan War, which is nonsense. But it's funny because they're trying to make their philosophical roots be very old and all over the world. That's the whole point of that whole prologue there. Thank you for that super chat. Thank you for the super chat, Solar Night. Could Adam clans been the first Caucasians on Earth, appearing 8,000 years ago? Far north, isolated? No, that's silly. Why Adam? I mean, the other explanations through the Bible, at least, you have Japheth for that. They have three races. You have Japheth, you have Shem, and you have Ham. And it's the Asian, black, and white, basically. Or European, African, Asian. But not Adam. Adam's the progenitor of the whole world. So I don't know why it would be Caucasian. I don't know what that means. I don't know what you mean by that. Even Plato's world soul wouldn't just be Caucasian. It would just be, even Plato's world soul doesn't even seem to be necessarily only for humans either. It seems to be all of life itself coming from that, which, whatever, it's a little bit different. I admit that the Judean doctrines are not perfectly 100% Platonist. I just think they're heavily drawing from the most important parts of it and trying to keep up with it, at the very least, is the best way I would describe it. They're trying to keep up with it. They're not trying to say, they're not Platonists. Like, they're not like, we're part of the school of Platonism. But they are looking at the doctrine of Platonism and Pythagoras and going, these are really learned men, and we want to be learned men too, which is understandable, So this is what I think happened. And I think Plato is a little more advanced than like Zoroaster was. Zoroaster seems to be just as advanced as someone like Pythagoras. But Plato has more meat on his plate, I guess, is what I would say. He tries to unify dualism and monism into what I just explained, the whole intermediary third substance thing, which brings you back to a monistic philosophy. But it also has this multiplicity aspect. It solves the one and the many problem. And it solves the problem of good and evil and night and day and male and female. It sort of just fixes everything, if that makes sense. Let's see. What else we got? Got a little bit more time here. Let me just let's go back to Timaeus. Let's go back to Timaeus and see something real quick. 1 second. Let me just see something real quick. Okay. $34B. That's what I wanted to look up. $34B. So, can you see my screen? Okay.
It says right here, such then was the sum of reasoning for the ever-existing God concerning the God which was one day to be existent, whereby he made it smooth and even equal on all sides from the center, a whole and perfect body compounded of perfect bodies. In the midst thereof he set soul, which he stretched throughout the whole of it, and therewith he enveloped also exterior to its body, and as a circle, remember we saw that in Symposium, revolving in a circle, he established one soul and solitary heaven, and able of itself because of its excellence to company with itself, and needing none other beside, sufficing unto itself as acquainting my friend. And because of all this, he generated it to be a blessed God. There it is. That we already read this, but I'm just want to drill this home. This is the world soul. This is the Adam, the eudaimona theon, or the logos in John. This is what so John's logos, Genesis is Adam, and Plato's eudaimona theon, or world soul, or living creature, the living like this. This is all the same thing. It's God creating man in his image. This is how the process came about. And Genesis has its own way of describing this process. They use their own way of they use their own mythological tendencies of what, Yahwistic tendencies to do it. And this is how you get Genesis. And then Plato has his way of telling it. But they all kind of are under the same sort of doctrinal idea that there's one God who creates a living being in the image of himself. This is what's known as the world soul. And as regards to the soul, although we are essaying to describe it after the body, God did not likewise plan it to be younger than the body. For when uniting them, he would not have permitted the elder to be ruled by the younger. But as for us men, even as we ourselves partake largely of the accidental and causal, so also do our words. God, however, constructed the soul to be older than the body, that's Adam, Eve to be older than body, and prior in birth and excellence, since she was to be the mistress and ruler, and it the ruled. And he made her of the materials and in the fashion which I shall now describe. And it's funny because Genesis is sort of telling a similar story as this, where you have a circular world soul that's neither male nor female, and then they takes from that dyad and splits them off into two different beings, which is body and soul, male and female, Adam and Eve. It's very trippy if you think about it. It's really weird, but you can see it. Once you see it, it's so obvious what's happening here. Midway between the being, which is indivisible and remains always the same, and the being, which is transient and divisible in bodies, he blended a third form of being, compounded out of the twain, that is to say, out of the same and the other. And in like manner, he compounded it midway between that one of them which is indivisible and the one which is divisible in bodies. And he took three of them and blent them together into one form, and forcing the other into union with the same, in spite of it being naturally difficult to mix. And with the aid of being, he had mixed them and had made them one out of three. Straightway he began to distribute the whole thereof into so many portions as was meet, and each portion was a mixture of the same and other of being. And he began making the division thus. So this is how he does it. All right. And as I already pointed out earlier, you have this concept in later Judaism, and it starts with Philo, by the way. So this is pre-Christian, but the Kabbalah Jews pick up on this big time, where you have this Adam Kadmon figure. primordial man, Adam Elyon, Adam of the highest, Adam Allah. So, what is it? It comes from Philo, original man or heavenly man. And let's see if I can pull. I want to pull up Philo and see exactly what he says. This is from On the Allegory of the. Hold on a second. We'll pull that up in a second. Setting out to duplicate biblical account of Adam, who was formed in the image of God in Genesis 1, and of the first man whose body God formed of the earth in Genesis 2, he combines with it Platonic theory of forms, taking the primordial Adam as the idea, the form. This is so brilliant what Philo's doing here. I almost think he's right, though. I almost think this is what the author intended. And the created man of flesh as the image. I think Philo might be right, dude. I think this is exactly what Genesis was trying to say. I don't think there's a mistake here, or a contradiction, or a hypothesis for a. I think they wrote this on purpose. The remarkable contradiction between Genesis 1:27 and Genesis 2:7 could not escape the attention of the Pharisees, for whom the Bible was a subject for close study. In explaining the various views concerning Eve's creation, they thought that Adam was created as a man-woman, androgynous, explaining Zecher va Nakuba. Genesis, and male and female instead of man and woman, and that the separation of the sexes arose from the subsequent operation upon Adam's body as related in the scripture. This explains Philo's statement that the original man was neither man nor female, nor woman. The doctrine concerning the Logos is also made man made in the likeness, although tinged with true Philonic coloring, is based on the theology of the Pharisees. Genesis Rabbah. Thou hast formed me behind and before. Psalm 139:5 is to be explained before the first and after the last day of creation. God moved the spirit of the waters, moved the Messiah, the spirit of the Messiah, the spirit of Adam in the parallel passage. Blah 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 blah. Anyways, Gnosticism. Oh yeah, this is in Gnosticism as well. You can see the proto-anthropos is in Gnosenes, proto-anthropos, and then the earthly Adam. There's two of them. Adamus, he calls it, the Gnosene preacher. Hermetic literature, Manichaeism, it's all pervading throughout the antiquity. This idea of a heavenly first man and an earthly first man. So why can't Genesis have that? I don't know. It's right. People think it's a mistake. That's what's so funny about this. For me to be right, I'm just taking the text where it says. For the documentary hypothesis people, they think there's a mistake happening. Who's adding more on that we don't like? Who's making it more complex? I don't think I am. I think I'm just taking the text at face value and going, other people saw it this way too. I mean, let's see. Let's go to Philo. Wait, which text is it that Philo talks about this? Let's see. So Philo talks about this in. Oh, that doesn't help me. That doesn't help me at all. Allegoris Legum. What is that? Oh, it doesn't help me. What is this, Philo? Hold on. Oh, the interpretation of the laws. Okay. So, hold on a second. What the hell? Why isn't this typing? On the special laws? Is that what it's called? Nope, it's not that one. I don't know which one it is. You know what? Let's pull up this text right here. So this text right here is called, Who is the Divine Heir? Who is the heir of divine things? This is a fascinating text, by the way, because I think there's a lot of Trinitarian stuff in here. Look at this. He says right here, so then the two natures, the reasoning power. Here, let me back up a little bit. In fact, I regard the soul as being in man what the heaven is in the universe. Ooh, so that's very Platonic. So then the two reasoning and intellectual natures, one in man and the other in the all, prove to be integral and undivided, and that is why we read, he did not divide the birds. Our mind is likened to a pigeon, since the pigeon is the tame and domesticated creature. By the way, that's the same word for dove. I should have just translated as dove because it makes more sense. While the turtle dove stands as the figure of the mind, which is the pattern of ours. For the word, logos, or reason of God, is a lover of the wild and solitary, never mixing with medley of things, and have come into being only to perish. But its wanted resort is ever above in its study, is to wait on one and one only. So then the two natures, the reasoning power within us and the divine word or reason above us, are indivisible, yet indivisible as they divide other things without number. The divine word separated and apportioned all that is in nature. Our mind deals with these things, material and immaterial, which the mental process brings within its grasp, divides them into an infinity of infinities, and never ceases to cleave them. This is the result of its likeness to the Father and Maker of all. For the Godhead is without mixture or infusion or parts. Isn't that interesting? For the Godhead is without mixture or infusion or parts, and yet has become the whole world, the cause of mixture, infusion, division, and multiplicity of parts. And thus it will be natural for these two, which are in the likeness of God, the mind within us and the mind above us, should subsist without parts or severance, and yet be strong and potent to divide and distinguish everything that is. Wow. So, all right, ready for this? Where is it? I think it's in here. Dedicated to these three: soul, sense, and speech. I think this is it. We might now pass on, but there is an example division. Okay, hold on. I got a couple more minutes. As in the story of Genesis, 3 creatures were divided. There were 6 halves, and therefore the dividing logo stands in the sacred position of the 7th. We have a parallel in this great chandelier of heaven and earth. They are numberless thoughts which beset the mind and drag it down and feast upon the bodily element in us. And when we read that Abraham sat down with them, signifies a wise man attitude in these thoughts. These have dedicated. Okay, here we go. Those who appropriate the trusts are countless in number, for which does not assert that the soul and sense and speech, each and all, are his own possession. Soul, sense, and speech, thinking that to perceive, to speak, and to apprehend rests with himself alone. But small is the number of those who guard the trust as something holy and inviolable. These have dedicated these three, soul, sense, and speech. By the way, this word logon, speech, to God. For they took them all for God, not for themselves, so that they naturally acknowledge that through him come the activities of each, the reflections of the mind, the language in which speech expresses itself, pictures presented to these, presented to sense. Those then who assert their ownership of the three receive the heritage which their miserable state deserves, a soul malevolent, a chaos of unreasoning passions, held down by a multitude of vices, sometimes mauled by greed and lust, like a strumpet in the stews, sometimes fast bound as in a prison by a multitude of ill deeds, herded with malefactors, not of humankind, but habits, which his unanimous judgment has declared worthy of arrest, speech browbeating, keen edge against truth, working harm to its victims and shame to its employers, sense insatiable, ever imbibing the objects of sense, yet through its uncontrolled, this is a long-ass sentence, holy shit. Incapable of reaching satisfaction, regardless of its monitors, blind, deaf, and derisive to all that they preach for its benefit. Huh. Here it is again. God had dedicated each of the three to him, guarding them for the owner, as in truth, sanctified and holy, the thinking faculty, though it should, of nothing else but God and his excellences. Huh. So, I just think there's a lot that lines up here. Let me see something real quick. Huh. Thank you for the super chat. Bible means, yeah, biblioteca means library. Biblion means books. So, biblioteca would mean library. Bible, yeah, biblia means books. So, but yeah, that's what the Bible is. It's a library of books. Let me see. Let me just you want to keep going? What do you guys think? You want to keep going for a little bit more and I can do like another half hour or something like that. Maybe even longer. I don't know. We can go a little bit longer. What do you guys think? I'm reading the chat right now. I'm looking at the chat. You want to keep do some more? I can keep going through Genesis a little bit. It's up to you. In it to win it longer. Give him hell. Okay. Let's see here. By the way, the Latin version calls it the Anima Mundi. That's why you see my that's what you see on my, what's it called? Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is let's go back. Let's go to do you know who Ken Wheeler is? No. Who is Ken Wheeler? Can you hear me, by the way? Oh, you can hear me, yeah. For some reason, I lost like sound or something. Ken Wheeler. Ken Wheeler. No idea who that is. Looks like a philosopher, maybe? Here, let me share it. I guess I'll share it since you paid me $2 to ask that question. Ken Wheeler. Interview with Ken Wheeler. Ken Wheeler runs a YouTube channel, Theoria of Phanes, with over 300,000 subscribers. He is a philosopher, translator, photographer, prepper, among other things. His knowledge of metaphysics, in the true sense of the word, is unparalleled in the 21st century. He seamlessly unifies the field of physics, cosmology, logic, and monistic, epiphatic metaphysics into a cohesive worldview based on ancient and perennial wisdom. Ken wrote the first introduction to our book, Monad, and we asked him to grace us with it. Oh, sounds cool. Where's the link to his channel? YouTube. Here we go. Oh, I think I know this channel. I think I've seen this channel around before. I think I've seen it. I mean, it kind of looks familiar. But I'll definitely check it out. I'll give it a subscribe. That looks good. Thank you for that super chat, by the way. Let's see. Okay, so I think I showed the parts that I wanted to show from Timaeus. Let's go back to Genesis for a second. So what I noticed is now they make, after Genesis 2:7, it's like there's two Adams here. I mentioned this already. I know that. But let's continue right from where it ends up. And then he plants the garden. So I think what happens is there's two creation accounts, because there's a spiritual creation account, and then there's a physical earthly creation account. And I think it's intended that way. This is why I don't think there was ever a redaction. And I don't think the documentary half of this makes a lot of sense, because you're basically positing that these people couldn't figure out how to rewrite a text. They have two versions of a text, and they have to stitch them together, and like that's why there's two accounts instead of just making one account. Like, really? That's really what the consensus is? It's really weird to me. Let's see. Let me just here. I'm gonna pull up something. I'm gonna show something on my channel real quick. I'm just gonna grab something while I'm waiting for it, though. If you just don't mind, let me just pull something up. So when I made a video a long time ago with Gemerkin, let's see. Here. Popular. Which one was it again? I can't remember which video I made where I talked about this, but I wanted to show something that I discussed. If I can find it. I guess I can't find it right now. I don't know which video it was. All right, here, let me do this. Let me put back on this video real quick. I'll be right back. The one where I talk about Demetrius and Philarion and all that stuff. And here.
Of monotheism. And at this time, the priesthoods of Yahweh and El synced with that of the craftsmen and demiurgic creator gods of Egypt and Greece. Yahweh of the Elohim and the God who has its roots all over Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean world, such as Kronos, El.
Okay, so I want to pull something up in a second. Just give me 1 second. Let me go. Let me do this. All right, right back.
Ptah is an Egyptian deity responsible for creating the world, manifesting it through potent force of spoken words. A hymn from Egypt's 22nd dynasty praises Ptah for shaping the world with the vision of his heart. Meanwhile, the Shabaka stone, originating from the 25th dynasty, mentions Ptah bestowed life upon all deities and their spirits using his heart in his voice. The creation by the voice, something we see in the God of the Old Testament. His worship then moved beyond the borders of Egypt, all the way into Syria, and was exported throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. Through dissemination by the Phoenicians, we find figures of Ptah in Carthage. His epithets: Ptah, the begetter of the first beginning; Ptah, Lord of truth; Ptah, Lord of eternity; one who listens to prayers; master of ceremonies; master of justice; the God who made himself to be God; the double being, the beautiful face. Now, some of you watching this right now may be familiar with the Heliopolitan Aeneid and the creation myths that say that Amun or Atum is the self-created craftsman who created the other gods. And though this is certainly true, the priesthood in Memphis and Crocodipolis and the Elephantines have competing mythologies that make Ptah the self-created demiurge who creates the other gods and humans. An Elephantine, Khnum, who like Ptah is also depicted as a craftsman or demiurge with the potter's wheel behind him, just as Ptah has images of himself with the potter's wheel behind him, as he creates gods and humans alike. Porphyry once said,
At the city of Elephantine, there is an image worshipped, which in other respects is fashioned in the likeness of a man and sitting. It is of a blue color and has a man's head and a diadem bearing the horns of a goat. He sits with a vessel of clay beside him, on which he is molding the figure of a man. And from having the face of a ram and the horns of a goat, he indicates the conjunction of sun and moon, Ra and Yah, in the sign of the ram, Amun, while the color of blue indicates that the moon in that conjunction brings rain, Tefnut. He goes on to say, in the mysteries of Eleusis, the Hierophant is dressed up to represent the demiurge, and the torchbearer the sun, the priest at the altar the moon, and the sacred herald Hermes. Moreover, a man is admitted by the Egyptians among their objects of worship. For there is a village in Egypt called Anubis, in which a man is worshipped, and sacrifice offered to him, and the victims burned upon his altars. And after a little while, he would eat the things that had been prepared for him as for a man. They did not, however, believe the animals to be gods, but regarded them as likenesses and symbols of gods. And this is shown by the fact that in many places, oxen dedicated to the gods are sacrificed at their monthly festivals and in their religious services, for they consecrated oxen to the sun and moon.
All right. So, I just wanted to pull something up while I wanted to. So obviously, as I mentioned, there already is other monotheistic Genesis accounts that are that are showing like one God. Like I already showed, the Rig Veda has the one. What they don't do is they don't create a soul or man or Adam in the likeness of God. That's only in Genesis, and that's only in Timaeus. Another thing I noticed is, like, for example, there's this Iron Age text called the Shabaka stone. And this has a text on it. I'm thinking if I can find the text. This one right here. This hieroglyphic text. I think this is it. The living Horus who prospers. No, that's not it. That's not it. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Ptah, This is why I wanted to show you guys the Ptah video. Who made all and created the gods. And he is Tatan, who gave birth to the gods. From everything came forth, foods, provisions, divine offerings, and all good things. Thus it is recognized and understood that he is the mightiest of the gods. Thus Ptah was satisfied after he had made all things and all divine word. And I looked into this. This is actually like this is the translation, singular word. He uses his voice to create things. This is a logos creation theology. Indeed, Ptah is the fountain of life for the gods and all the material reality. This is a monistic theology where there's one God on top of the other gods. You can see this lines 48 recount the creation myth known as Memphite theology. Ptah, the patron of god of craftsmen. By the way, the demiurge. That's what this is. A craftsman. Ptah is a craftsman god. He's the demiurge, metalworker, artisan, architects, viewed as the creator god and divine craftsman of the universe, who was responsible for all existence. Creation was first a spiritual intellectual activity facilitated by divine heart, thought, and tongue, word. This is like, what the hell? This is very proto-Platonic right here. Then creation became a physical activity carried out by Atum, who, created by Ptah's teeth and lips, produced the Aeneid. Oh my God, this is, you don't understand. If you read Proclus, you're probably going, holy shit, how did the hell did this is like Proclus, but in 700 BC. Because he creates Atum, which you can say is the world soul. And then the world soul produces the Aeneid, which is what is the exact word that Platonus used to describe the 9 quora muses. The 9 quora muses that are the intermediaries between humans and gods. It's called the Aeneid, the 9 muses. So, and by the way, Plato himself credits the Egyptians for all the knowledge. He says it all goes back to the Egyptians. He says this himself multiple times. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It's like, these ideas do come from more ancient sources. They're being developed slowly over time. And I think Plato's just the one he's just the Wayne Gretzky of all this. He's the one who figured it all out. Like, he's the one who put it all together in the most coherent way. So Saint Aquinas commentary on Aristotle metaphysics. Yeah, Aquinas started Thomism, which was taking Aristotle's metaphysics and applying it to Christianity and seeing Christianity through the lens of Aristotle. And also later Platonists, especially medieval Platonists, their whole project is to unify Aristotle and Plato into one. Now, because if you look like the famous philosopher painting, if you see it, oh, here, I could pull it up right now. Wikipedia. The School of Athens, it's called. If you look at this, School of Athens, wait, when was this made? 1509 by Raphael. And Raphael is from the school that Platon started, the Florence Academy. Look, there's Diogenes chilling by himself on the ground like a weirdo. And then you have Plato, and if you can see this, I don't know if you can see this, it says Timaeus. He's holding Timaeus on, he's holding his Timaeus, and he's pointing up. And you notice Aristotle is holding ethics, and he's looking down, and he's going, hold on, chill out, hold on, Plato, chill out. And Aristotle's like, no, we got to think above, highly. Metaphysics, Timaeus, the one, God, theology, theocracy, that type of stuff, religion. And Aristotle's grounded. So Plato is heavenly, and he thinks in the noetic realm. He thinks in the realm of forms. His head is in the clouds. Whereas Aristotle's grounded. chthonic, worldly, thinking of ethics, thinking of the world, thinking of eudaimon, literally eudaimonia, being good, feeling good. He's grounded in the world. And to unify both is to call the middle way. It's like you're not all, and the head's not all in the clouds. You're not thinking all this fucking crazy shit about the logos and the creation, but you're also grounded. You are thinking of those things, but you're also grounded in the world, the real world, the world of empiricism, the world of physical, like things we can study and touch, the world of science, the world of rationalism. That's Aristotle. So you need both, and both of them make up Western thought. Nothing to do with Abraham, Jesus. Nobody really follows Jesus, because if you follow Jesus, you'd be a hermit. You'd be out in the street. You'd be sitting on a pillar. You'd be not eating food. You'd be fasting for 40 days. You'd give up all your worldly possessions. No, you're not doing it. If you're watching this video right now, you're not a true Christian. Sorry. You're not a true Christian. You're not a true follower of Jesus. I'm just saying. Luckily, that you don't have to be, but I'm just saying. Most of us are somewhere in between Plato and Aristotle. That's the real Western man right there. These are the people who shaped our world that we live in right here, along with everyone else in here too. But I'm just saying, like, they are the masters of all this, everything you see here. Like, this is Euclid. You can see Euclid doing all his math shit. You can see this is Strabo. Strabo loves geography. You got a poet. I forgot what this poet's name is. I think that might be I don't know, somebody, who knows. But they're all the greats of the Hellenistic period and even pre-Socratic thought thinkers and all that stuff. They're all on here. So there it is. Peter von Deslock, thank you for the 2. Monistic emanationism versus monotheistic creationism. Nice. That's what my debate was, basically. That's what my debate with Jay Dyer was the philosophical monistic emanationism, which I think, if you really wanted to be like serious about it, is the philosophical a priori cosmological argument, metaphysical argument, I should say, ontological worldview that makes the most sense, that's the most grounded in reality. Monotheistic creationism, though, is the reason why it's more popular, is because it has this gigantic religion that's a big corporation that has billions and trillions of dollars, and everyone wants it to be true. So that's why. And that's why it's always been that way. That's why it's always been elites are the Platonists and the everyday Joes are the Christians. So I think there's a quote about that. A quote about elites being Platonists and plebs being Christian. I think there's a quote about that. It's like a joke or something. Oh, Arthur Schopenhauer. Christianity is Platonism for the people, and Platonism is Christianity for the... Wait. Where is it? Platonism. Christianity is Platonism for the people, for the masses, and then Platonism is Christianity for the few, or something stupid like that. I forgot what it was, but and there's another quote where it's like, "Oh, you want me to show you who the difference between a Platonist and a Christian? Ask them who the Logos is." That's it. And like they're basically identical. Is the joke. Like, the only difference is to ask them who the Logos is, and that's it. One of them will say Apollo is the Logos. The other one will say Jesus or something. That's it. Anyways, thank you for the $5. First Corinthians 15:22. For all, as in Adam all die, so in Christ all be made alive. Yes, exactly. You're getting it. So this is exactly what I'm trying to say. Is that I don't have to pull that up. Yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. What I think was going on, people like Philo and after Philo, which are the Christians, started to recognize how to reinterpret the text through the true Platonic worldview,
through the true educated, rational way to interpret the text. And what they came up with was, we die in Adam, but we were meant to live in the first Adam, which is the first form, the Logos, who was there in the beginning. So you're exactly right. That's exactly how you should interpret that, in my opinion. D. Burden, thank you for the $10. Appreciate that. Why does the monist theological establishment actively denies that their divine revelation is actually retroactive plagiarism of Egyptian and Greek physics? Good question. I would say because they don't want it to, because why wouldn't they? Why would they admit this? Why would they want their whole, it doesn't, I mean, this, you know the answer. I think this is a rhetorical question. They're not going to sit there and go, yeah, our religion comes from these other religions. Like, no, they're not going to do that. I mean, I guess you have like people like C.S. Lewis and Eusebius who would say, oh, these other cultures were pointing to the true theology, which is Christianity. Eusebius has this famous book right here. This one right here. Preparation for the Gospels. And he admits this stuff. He's like, oh, you ever heard of Sancho Niathan or Philo of Byblos or the Egyptian Atanism? Or he's going through all these, everything we're talking about. Plato, Aristotle, the pre-Socratics, and he's picking apart all their lines that he thinks point to Christianity. So his way around this problem isn't to go, we're stealing from the pagans. His way around it is to go, the pagans were right. They were being divinely inspired, and they're pushing us towards Christ. You got to admit, it's a good way around the problem. It's a better way around the problem than just to pretend it doesn't exist, I think. I give him credit for that one. C.S. Lewis was very much like that too. C.S. Lewis was like, yeah, you know what? Dionysus, Horus, Apollo, they all had these things in common with Jesus. Mercury was the Logos. Hercules was known to die and resurrect. They're all pointing to the true Son of God, which is Jesus. It's so simple, guys. That's what C.S. Lewis would say. All Christian mystics are secretly Platonists. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. There's another passage I want to look at real quick. But got a couple more minutes here, which is from Genesis 2:18. By the way, while I'm full screen, you really got to check these out. This is the first one you should check out: Plato's Timaeus and Biblical Creation Accounts from Russell Gmerkin, Routledge, Copenhagen International. This is a little more harder, a little less exciting, a little more technical and boring. Plato and the Creation of the Hebrew Bible. This is mostly with law codes and stuff. This one gets more into the Genesis stuff like we talked about today. But it is very scholarly. It's not a book for the masses. It's not like, this is not a popular book. This is very just strictly to business. Get to business. Here's what the data is. It's not trying to tell you a story. It's not like reading what's his name? Carl Jung or whatever his name is. This is scholarly stuff. But anyways, I wanted to go to Genesis 2:18. Because as Gmerkin points out, he says in the Septuagint, the gods are plural. But I don't know what he's talking about, because I see the gods plural in the Hebrew, Elohim, I see that. But I guess at least this version, this 1851 version, has kurios ho theos, so that's in the singular. So that's not plural. It'd be theoi. It should be theoi, not theos. So I don't know if Gmerkin's talking about a different manuscript or something. I have no idea, but I'm not seeing the plural here. I'm seeing singular God. So he writes, it is remarkable that Genesis 2:18, LXX, has gods in the plural,
consistent with Genesis 1:26, Masoretic text, but he could have just said consistent with the Masoretic text to begin with. I don't know what he's talking about. So I have to find out what he meant by this. There might be something I'm missing here, but that's why I wanted to see it, because I didn't know about it. Anyways, I was just looking at that now. So plurality, yeah, I don't see that here, huh? Even in the next passages, it doesn't have a plurality. But it is interesting how. And this is the passage where Jehovah formed every beast of the field, every bird of the heavens, and brought them unto the man to see that he would call them. So you notice how in Plato's Statesman, man is the ruler of all the animals, and this is what is reflected here. Adam is the ruler of every living creature, and it uses that same term that Plato uses, sukein zosan. Otto Adam sukein zosan. Adam called the sukein zosan. So this is a very obviously platonically informed. That's the way that I would describe it. Platonically informed. It doesn't necessarily have to be stolen from Platonism or copied from Platonism, but it's platonically informed. That's the correct, in my opinion, that is the correct way to describe this. Because it's got a lot of differences with Timaeus. It's not completely 100% in line with Timaeus, but it's informed by Timaeus. That's how I would describe it. I'm glad that I figured that out before I ended the stream. Solar and night, thank you for the 2. It says, God, Elohim, can self-replicate? Well, yeah, it can emanate. It can create image in the image of itself. That's what Adam is. It's made in the image of itself, which I would argue that's what an emanation is. When something is copied from itself. It's like a copy, it's like a duplicate. To me, that's what an emanation is. An image of. Literally says in the image of. It's like light reflecting on mirror. It makes an image of it. It's like, we're dealing with like images and light, like photography. It's weird. It's a weird way to describe it. So just see one more thing, a couple more things in here. Here we go. Genesis 2:1. So according to Gemerkin, he says the text of Genesis 2:1 appears defective, since all their multitude or host, while perhaps appropriate to the heavens, is inappropriate as applied to the earth. It thus appears likely that the completion of the heavens and the earth and their whole orderly furnishing or adornment, cosmos, in the LXX, better reflects the sense of the original. Now, this is what I wanted to say before I close out. The Septuagint is not a translation of the Masoretic text. People get confused about that. The Septuagint is a translation of some other original Hebrew that we don't actually have anymore. And this is also a copy of a copy of a copy of some other original Hebrew. So when you try to look at this as a perfect translation of this, you're going to see it doesn't line up perfectly. So, yeah. But that's what he means by, and the heavens and the earth were finished and the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finishes his work. And look, you can see the Septuagint has extra verses here. Hote Adam kai gune auto kai uk esukundo. And he made them two, and they were naked, Adam and the wife. Huh. Oh, it's from the last passage. Why does it say 3:1? I don't know. Anyways. So, okay, so yeah, I guess there's some interesting stuff in the Greek,
And what Gmerkin points out, and I think he's right, is that the Greek seems to be reflecting the original in some cases better than the Masoretic text does. And sometimes the Dead Sea Scrolls, sometimes when we find the Dead Sea, when we look through the Dead Sea Scrolls, we could see the original reflected better in those too. So there's been a lot, and this is how we know, there's been a lot of redactions over time on the Hebrew side. That those 10th century manuscripts reflect a lot of changes, not major doctrinal changes that'll make you go, oh my God, they changed their whole religion. But I'm talking about like verses taken out, verses added here and there, and like some other minor variants that are not even worth talking about. But Genesis has a couple of these examples that make you just go, whoa, that was a big change. Yeah. Another thing that Gmerkin says real quick, elements of Plato's system of classification of life forms are present in structural elements. A, and God said, and C, divine creative acts. Plato developed a unique methodology for classifying, analyzing, and organizing concepts and entities that is illustrated in many of his dialogues, notably in Sophist, Statesman, one I just showed you. This method of classification was the immediate forerunner of Aristotle's biological taxonomy, which later developed into modern system of biological classification known as Linnean taxonomy. Plato held that each group of entities and the form of which they were based held that each group of such entities in the form, held that had a proper name by which it was known, and the etymological speculation involving that name could reveal aspects of the divine form. These elements of classification are all prominent in Genesis 1, especially in respect to the various types of created life forms, the existence of an ideal image or likeness that is the prototype of every type of created thing, created being. Genesis 1, 11 through 12. Let's take a look at that right now while we're here. Genesis 1, 11 through 12. Genesis 1, 11 through 12. So, and he said, let the earth put forth grass, herbs yielding seed, fruit trees bearing fruit after their kind, wherein the seed thereof upon the earth, and it was so. And he brought forth grass, herbs yielding seed after their kind, and trees bearing fruit, wherein the seed thereof. God saw that it was good. That's what he means by that. The identification of the characteristics that set up and distinguish various aspects, grasses and fruit seeds, sea monsters, reptiles, fish, four-footed domesticated animals, wild beasts. Plato's method of diaresis was applied to animals and statesmen. I showed you guys that one too. He definitely does that. Plato's Timaeus identified 5 types of animals and statesmen. Plato's Timaeus identifies 5 types of ensouled beings: the stars of the heaven, which he claimed were divine, the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, and the animals of the earth, which possess varying degrees of intelligence. And besides these plants, which possess a soul and sensations of appetites, but no reason. Other than the category of heavenly stars, the basic divisions of life forms in Timaeus are in striking correspondence with Genesis 1, including the description of fish, birds, and animals as living souls. Sukain zosan, that's what I said. That word is used in both. Isn't that crazy? That word's used in both the Timaeus and in Genesis. So I think it is. I think there's so much lining up. Like to conclude what we just talked about, you have a singular God who's eternal, who's in the beginning. She wants to come up here. Let her up. You have a singular God who's there in the beginning, who creates the cosmos with, from like a chaotic, watery, eternal realm. And then first thing he does is create an image of himself to be the world's soul, the psyche of everything. And so How many things is this? 3. That was fucking hilarious. That was a fun debate, though. I don't have any problem with Jay Dyer anymore. I like Jay. So that was fun. I respect that he's a good debater. But yeah, what was I gonna say? Yeah, you have a world soul, or Adam Kadmon, as the Kabbalists will call it. And all they're doing is they're drawing from Philo, just like Christians draw from Philo. So people are going to go, that's blasphemous. You know, they made that up later. So did you. The New Testament, you just borrowed from Philo too. So, anyways, I think this has been a fun stream. I want to do more of these. You know what you guys should do in the comments of this video? Write down texts that you think would be good to read and compare to like do some comparative biblical stuff. I don't know. We can think of some examples maybe. But that's it for tonight. It's been 3.5 hours. I'm gonna go get some food, take the dog for a walk. You've just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power